My name is Kang Mino, and at 19 years old I had exactly 3 valuable possessions: a laptop with one hinge, a rice cooker that only worked if I kicked it, and a rental contract so suspicious that even the landlord had looked embarrassed while signing it. I was a broke university student in Seoul, which meant my daily strategy was less build a bright future and more survive until the convenience store discounts the triangle kimbap. My scholarship covered tuition. My part-time job covered almost half my rent, and blind optimism covered everything else. The apartment I rented was on the 4th floor of an old building squeezed between a karaoke bar and a fried chicken place. On paper, it was a studio. In reality, it was one room pretending to be several rooms by having furniture in different corners. My bed touched the wall. The fridge touched the bed. My desk touched the fridge. And when I opened the bathroom door, it touched me. The realtor had called the place efficient. I called it a shoebox with plumbing. The only strange thing about it was a narrow wooden door beside the kitchenette. The landlord told me it was a storage closet. I opened it on the first day and found enough space for a mop, a broken umbrella, and one extremely confident spider. That was it. Then, at exactly midnight, the apartment made a sound like a hotel elevator arriving. Ding. I sat up in bed, grabbed the only weapon within reach, which was my rice cooker lid, and stared at the closet door. Light was shining underneath it. This was already a problem because my closet did not have electricity. It barely had dimensions. I approached slowly, wearing one sock because I had lost the other sometime during midterms. I opened the door. The closet was gone. Behind it was a bedroom. Not my bedroom. A real bedroom. A huge one. A soft king-size bed sat in the middle under warm ceiling lights. There were built-in wardrobes, a reading chair, thick carpet, charging ports, blackout curtains, and a window showing a gentle nighttime city skyline that absolutely did not exist on the other side of my apartment wall. I closed the door. I opened it again. Bedroom. I closed it. Opened it. Still bedroom. I stepped inside, expecting reality to notice the mistake and crush me between dimensions. Instead, the carpet felt warm under my feet. The bed was so soft that when I sat on it, my body immediately filed an application to live there permanently. I checked the fake window. It showed distant towers, moving traffic, even clouds. When I tried to open it, it did not budge. When I pressed my face against the glass, there was no cold. It was basically a wall-sized screen with an attitude. On the nightstand sat a small brass plaque. It had one sentence engraved on it. One new room will be added every day at midnight. Under that was a smaller sentence. Please enjoy your stay. I read it 6 times. Then I checked for hidden cameras. Then I checked whether carbon monoxide poisoning could cause luxury interior design hallucinations. Then I slept for 9 straight hours on the new bed and missed my morning lecture. That was how I accepted the supernatural. Not with courage, with lumbar support. The next night I stayed awake until 11:59, sitting cross-legged in front of the wooden door with my phone recording. The bedroom had not disappeared. I had spent all day testing it. I carried my desk lamp inside. It worked. I brought my backpack in. It stayed there. I stood in the room while a friend called me, and my phone still had signal, which honestly felt more impossible than the room itself because I barely had signal in the bathroom. At midnight, the same sound came from somewhere deeper inside. Ding. A new door appeared on the far wall of the bedroom. I almost dropped my phone. I opened it. Gym. A full private gym. Treadmill, bench press, squat rack, cable machines, dumbbells from 2 kilograms all the way to weights that looked capable of flattening an elephant. There was a mirrored wall, rubber flooring, towels, a water dispenser, and a touchscreen that greeted me by name. I had not exercised voluntarily since middle school. The room had apparently made a terrible choice. I tried the treadmill anyway. It automatically set itself to beginner. I felt insulted, increased the speed, ran for 40 seconds, and nearly met my ancestors. The third room was a cinema, not a television room. A cinema. 30 reclining seats, a giant screen, surround sound, a popcorn machine, and a snack counter that somehow refilled itself. I tested the popcorn. Free. I tested the soda. Free. I tested whether I could carry the soda outside the apartment. I could. That was the first moment my brain stopped thinking like a scared tenant and started thinking like a broke student. Free soda meant value. Infinite popcorn meant opportunity. By day 4, the apartment added a laundry room with 6 washers and 6 dryers. I owned 8 shirts total. By day 5, I got a gaming room with 3 ridiculous computers, 2 consoles, racing seats, a VR setup, and internet so fast my game updates finished before I had time to complain about them. On day 6, the apartment added a walk-in closet the size of my university classroom. It was empty. That one felt personal. On day 7, I got a bathroom with a marble tub, a rainfall shower, a sauna, and 1 toilet that had more buttons than my laptop. I stared at it for 5 minutes. The toilet stared back through a little blue status light. I decided we would learn to trust each other slowly. For the first week, I told nobody. I was not protecting a magical secret because I was wise. I was protecting it because I had no idea how to explain why my 12-square-meter studio apartment now contained roughly 400 square meters of interior space. I also did not know who technically owned the new rooms. My rental contract said I rented Unit 404, including all fixtures and attached storage. If the apartment magically grew an indoor cinema after signing, was that a fixture? Could my landlord raise the rent because my home had spontaneously developed a sauna? Was interdimensional square footage taxable? These questions kept me awake almost as much as the excitement. Then my rent was due. That brought me back to reality. I had 83,000 won in my bank account, and my landlord wanted 420,000. My part-time cafe manager had cut my shifts because I accidentally served a customer salt instead of sugar. In my defense, the containers looked identical. In my manager's defense, the customer had ordered 6 coffees for a business meeting and apparently ruined a merger. I needed money fast. That night, Room 8 appeared. It was a kitchen. Not an ordinary kitchen. It looked like a restaurant built for a celebrity chef. Steel counters, 3 ovens, industrial refrigerators, a freezer, a grill, a wok station, a pizza oven, a dishwasher, and shelves packed with cookware. The refrigerators were empty. I felt betrayed. Then I noticed a narrow pantry door. Inside were rice, flour, sugar, salt, spices, cooking oil, noodles, canned tomatoes, beans, potatoes, onions, eggs, milk, butter, cheese, and several other basic ingredients. I took out a bag of rice. Another bag slid forward behind it. I took that one too. Another appeared. I froze. I spent the next hour conducting what I called scientific research, and what any normal person would call stealing from an infinite pantry. Rice regenerated. Flour regenerated. Eggs regenerated. Milk regenerated. Cheese regenerated. The ingredients were not fancy, but they were unlimited. I could have solved world hunger. Instead, my first thought was that I would never buy ramen again. My second thought was much better. The next morning, I borrowed a folding table from the building's basement, set it outside campus, and sold egg sandwiches. I called them midnight sandwiches because produced by a possibly sentient apartment was too long for the sign. I used unlimited eggs, unlimited bread ingredients, and unlimited cheese. My only real cost was packaging. I sold out in 20 minutes. The next day I made twice as many, then 4 times as many. Then my classmate Yoon Hana found me carrying 80 sandwiches in 2 insulated bags and asked why I suddenly smelled like a bakery. Hana was the kind of person who could detect a lie before you finished telling it. She had sharp eyes, perfect grades, and the deeply irritating habit of being correct about everything. I told her I had access to a kitchen. She asked whose kitchen. I said a private one. She asked how private. I said extremely private. She looked at my studio apartment address on the delivery label stuck to 1 bag and then looked at me. I changed the subject by giving her a free sandwich. It worked for 11 seconds. By room 10, I had earned enough to pay rent. Room 9 had been a pantry separate from the kitchen, and unlike the basic ingredient closet, this one was enormous. Aisles stretched under fluorescent lights like a small grocery warehouse. Most shelves were empty, but anything I personally placed on a marked shelf became organized automatically. I put 1 can of tuna down and a little digital tag appeared beneath it saying, "Tuna, 1 unit." I moved the can. The tag followed. It was a magical inventory system. I put my socks on a shelf. The tag said, "Sock, 7 units, 1 unmatched." The apartment knew. I felt judged. Room 10 was a garage. This was where I began to understand that my home did not care about geometry at all. The garage was large enough for 6 cars. It had a concrete ramp leading upward to a metal shutter. I pressed the button beside it. The shutter opened and revealed a brick wall. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. My magical apartment had built a garage with no road access. There was a shiny car lift, tire tools, mechanic benches, a pressure washer, and parking spaces. But the exit led directly into what I assumed was the physical exterior wall of the building. I taped a piece of paper to the shutter that said, "Nice try." The next day, room 11 was a swimming pool. I stopped laughing. It was not a little pool. It was a 50-meter indoor pool with lanes, diving platforms, deck chairs, warm lighting, and a shallow section containing a tiny plastic duck. The duck was the first movable object the rooms had generated besides supplies and furniture. I picked it up. It squeaked. I named it Chairman Quack. Chairman Quack became my chief financial advisor. Whenever I considered a stupid business idea, I placed him on the table and asked what he thought. He always said nothing. This made him more useful than several finance influencers I followed online. For the next 2 weeks, my life turned into a nightly loot box. Every midnight, ding, new room. Some were useful. Room 12 was a study library with thousands of textbooks and reference books. Strangely, the shelves did not contain novels or copyrighted works I recognized. Instead, they held bizarrely specific manuals like Practical Pipe Repair, Beginner's Tax Accounting, Introduction to Indoor Citrus Trees, and How to Stop Panicking Around Electrical Panels. That last one felt targeted. Room 13 was a home office with printers and endless paper. Room 14 was a music studio. I could not play any instrument, so I spent an hour hitting drum pads and recording myself shouting my professor's name over dramatic bass. Room 15 was a greenhouse. Room 16 was an arcade. Room 17 was a tiny indoor basketball court. Room 18 was a tea room. Room 19 was a workshop filled with tools. Room 20 was a room containing nothing but massage chairs. I sat in one after class and woke up 3 hours later with the spiritual peace of a retired monk. Then came room 21. I opened the new door and found a convenience store. A full convenience store. Shelves, refrigerators, freezer cases, checkout counter, microwave station, hot water dispenser, even the little rotating rack for umbrellas. The lights were on. Soft music played. There was no employee. There were also no products. At first, I thought it was another empty storage space. Then I saw a small screen behind the counter. It displayed a message. Stock 1 item to register it. I put a bottle of water from the cinema on a shelf. The screen flashed. Water registered. The bottle remained. I removed it. A second bottle appeared in its place. My knees nearly gave out. I tested popcorn. Registered. A cheese sandwich. Registered. A carton of milk from the pantry. Registered. Eggs. Registered. Anything generated by the apartment could be stocked in the convenience store and would replenish endlessly. Anything from outside did not. I tested that with a single expensive strawberry I had bought as a luxury. The screen said external item. Replication unavailable. I ate the strawberry in disappointment. Then I stared at the store. This was no longer free groceries. This was a supply chain. I did what any responsible person with infinite food would do. I expanded my sandwich business into a secret campus snack empire. I was careful. I did not sell impossible quantities. I did not want a government agency kicking down my door and discovering Chairman Quack. I simply stopped buying ingredients and started producing more items. Egg sandwiches became grilled cheese. Grilled cheese became potato croquettes. Potato croquettes became rice bowls. I registered every apartment-produced item I could make, and the convenience store started replenishing finished food, too. That meant I only needed to cook something once. One perfect batch of garlic bread became infinite garlic bread. One tray of brownies became infinite brownies. One spicy chicken sandwich made from ingredients I could generate became endless spicy chicken sandwiches. Although it took me 6 tries to create a version that did not taste like regret. I rented a tiny kiosk near campus under a legal student business program. I stocked it each morning from duffel bags. Everyone thought I had a supplier. Technically, I did. My supplier was my bedroom wall. Hana became suspicious immediately. She bought 1 sandwich on Monday, another on Tuesday, then another on Wednesday. On Thursday, she brought all 3 wrappers to me and pointed out that the sandwiches had been exactly the same weight down to 1 gram. I told her consistency was important in food service. She asked why the toast marks were identical. I told her I had talent. She asked why one sesame seed was in the exact same place on every bun. I told her I had terrifying talent. She did not believe me. That night, room 23 appeared, and for the first time I found something that looked like a rulebook. The room resembled a small hotel lobby. There was a front desk, a bell, some sofas, and a wall covered in brass key hooks. Behind the desk sat a thick book titled Resident Guide. I opened it so fast I almost tore the cover. Most pages were blank. The first page listed 3 rules. The apartment expands once per local midnight. Rooms may exceed exterior dimensions. Permanent residents must enter willingly. That was it. I flipped through the whole book. Blank, blank, blank. I rang the desk bell. Nothing happened. I rang it again. Still nothing. I rang it 16 times because I am persistent when annoyed. A drawer slowly opened by itself. Inside was a card. Please stop. I stood there in silence. My apartment was alive enough to be irritated. That should have scared me. Instead, I was offended it had waited 16 bell rings to communicate. I wrote a question on a sheet of office paper. Can I show another person? I placed it on the desk. Nothing happened. I rang the bell once. A second card slid out. Yes. I wrote another. Will you hurt them? A card appeared. No. Another question. Will they be trapped? No. Another. Who built this place? The drawer slammed shut. Chairman Quack and I agreed that this was suspicious. The next afternoon, Hana followed me home. Not secretly. She just announced that she was coming over because she needed proof I was not running an illegal sandwich factory in a sewer. I could have refused, but by then hiding the apartment was becoming difficult. I was carrying 60 lunchboxes in a gym bag every morning. My grades had improved because I had a private library. I had stopped looking exhausted because I slept on a mattress worth more than my annual tuition. Also, Hana had once covered my rent when my scholarship payment was delayed, and she had never used that favor against me. So I let her inside. She looked around my tiny studio. She looked at the kitchenette. She looked at the bed shoved against the wall. Then she looked at me with the expression of someone who had expected organized crime and found mold. I opened the wooden door. She stared into the luxury bedroom, then at me, then into the bedroom, then back at the tiny studio behind us. She walked inside without speaking. I showed her the gym, then the cinema, then the kitchen, then the pool, then the convenience store, then the arcade. By the time we reached the magical hotel lobby, Hana had stopped asking questions and started taking notes. That was why I liked her. Most people would have screamed. Hana opened a spreadsheet. She estimated square footage. At room 23, my apartment already had more interior area than the entire 4th floor of the building. I showed her the resident guide. She read the 3 rules. Then she rang the bell once. A drawer opened. She wrote, "Can rooms be removed? No. Can Minyo choose the next room? No. Can rooms be dangerous?" The drawer stayed closed for 10 seconds. Then a card came out. Usually no. Hana looked at me. I looked at Hana. We both looked at Chairman Quack, whom I had placed on the desk. He remained professionally silent. I rang the bell and wrote, "What does usually mean?" The drawer opened. Good night. Then every light in the lobby switched off at once. We ran. Midnight arrived while Hana was still there. Ding. A new door appeared at the end of the lobby. Hana grabbed my sleeve. I grabbed Chairman Quack. We opened it together. It was a pet room. There were tiny beds, climbing platforms, feeding stations, toys, scratching posts, and one absurd miniature sofa. There were no animals. On the wall was a sign saying "Pets Welcome." Hana stared at it, then at me. That was when we heard scratching from inside the original studio. We sprinted back through 24 rooms, which by then took several minutes because my apartment had become a corridor maze designed by a drunken architect. The scratching came from the front door. I opened it. A wet orange cat walked in like he owned the lease. He ignored me, walked straight through the bedroom, past the gym, turned correctly at the cinema, continued through 2 hallways he had never seen, and entered the pet room. Then he jumped onto the miniature sofa and fell asleep. I stared at Hana. Hana stared at the cat. The cat did not care about either of us. The next morning, I asked the landlord whether anyone in the building had lost an orange cat. He said no. I checked local posts. Nothing. I took the cat to a vet. No chip. Healthy, about 1 year old, male. I named him Deposit because he appeared without warning and I was afraid I would never get rid of him. Deposit became the apartment's first permanent resident besides me. That mattered more than I realized, because the next midnight, when room 25 appeared, it was not random. It was a cat kingdom. I am not exaggerating. The room was 3 stories tall. Ramps spiraled up the walls. Rope bridges crossed the ceiling. There were tunnels, sunlit platforms, automated toys, heated cushions, and a fish-shaped fountain. Deposit took one look at it and became an emperor. I looked at the resident guide. A new sentence had appeared beneath the rules. Rooms may respond to residents. I immediately understood 2 things. First, the apartment was not just expanding. It was learning what we wanted. Second, I needed to be very careful what kind of people I invited to live with me. Because if Deposit could create a 3-story cat palace just by existing, I did not want to know what would happen if I let my classmate Dongsuk move in. Dongsuk had once said his dream room was a basement where every wall is a refrigerator full of energy drinks. Some dreams should remain dreams. For the next month, Hana became my unofficial apartment manager, which was impressive because I had never officially appointed her, and she absolutely did not live there. She made rules. No selling apartment-generated food in quantities large enough to crash local agriculture. No inviting strangers inside. No testing magical electrical outlets by sticking metal objects into them. That last rule existed because I had asked whether the electricity was real. And Hana correctly guessed how I planned to investigate. She also created a map. This became necessary very quickly. The rooms did not appear in a neat line forever. Sometimes a new door appeared inside the most recent room. Sometimes it appeared in an older room. Sometimes one room gained 2 doors. Hallways started forming. Stairs appeared. My tiny apartment became a branching dungeon where the boss monster was forgetting where I left my phone. Room 26 was a yoga studio. Room 27 was a second kitchen, except this one was entirely for baking. Room 28 was a small indoor garden with a koi pond. Room 29 was a storage locker hall. Room 30 was a barber shop. I tried cutting my own hair using the professional equipment and spent the next 2 weeks wearing a cap. Room 31 was a photography studio. Room 32 was a bowling alley. Room 33 was an empty white room with 1 button in the center. Hana told me not to press it. I pressed it. Gravity turned sideways. For 9 seconds, I fell across the room, bounced off a padded wall, lost 1 slipper, and watched Chairman Quack fly past my face like a yellow missile. Then gravity returned to normal. A sign lit up above the button. Zero gravity training chamber. Please secure loose items. I lay on the floor holding my knee. Hana stood safely in the doorway and wrote, Room 33. Minho trap on the map. The apartment was not dangerous exactly. It was just built with the assumption that its resident possessed common sense. That was its first major design flaw. Room 34 gave me a clinic. Not a hospital, thankfully. It had examination beds, first aid cabinets, basic diagnostic machines, an ice dispenser, and a robotic cabinet that produced bandages, antiseptic, pain relief patches, and other simple supplies. No prescription drugs, no mysterious healing potions, nothing that would turn me into a black market medical king. It did, however, provide a perfect cold pack for my gravity-related knee injury. I chose to interpret this as an apology. Room 35 was an indoor cafe. That was when Hana's business instincts became scary. The cafe had 20 tables, a counter, espresso machines, grinders, refrigerators, sinks, pastry cases, and a register. Like the convenience store, it could replenish apartment-generated items after I registered them. Nobody outside could enter the cafe without first walking through my original studio. But Hana realized we could use it as a production and testing space. We developed a rotating menu for my campus kiosk. I made 1 perfect sample of each item, registered it, and then stocked the kiosk from infinite copies. My income jumped. Not rich person income. Student without immediate financial despair income. For the first time in my life, I paid rent before the landlord reminded me. He sent me a message asking if everything was okay. That is how broke I had been. Then my landlord announced a building inspection. He wanted to check every unit's smoke detector, plumbing, and window seals. I read the message while sitting in my indoor cafe, drinking a free latte beside a koi pond that existed 40 meters deeper than the exterior wall of his building. I nearly inhaled foam. The inspection would happen Saturday at 10 in the morning. My front studio still looked normal. But there was one problem: the wooden storage door. If the landlord opened it, he would not find a mop closet. He would find a king-size bedroom with 3 exits leading into a private dimension. I considered locking the door. The original closet lock had disappeared on the first night. I considered blocking it with furniture. That would make it look more suspicious. I considered faking an illness. Hana reminded me that the landlord could simply come later. Then room 36 appeared. It was a security room. Banks of monitors covered the walls. At first, every screen was black. Then one lit up when I entered and displayed a live view of my original studio. Another showed the bedroom. Another showed the gym. I could switch between every internal room. There were no cameras visible anywhere, which meant the apartment itself was watching. That was unsettling for about 5 seconds. Then I found the control labeled access mode. It had 3 options: resident, guest, exterior visitor. I selected exterior visitor. A diagram appeared showing the wooden door near the kitchenette. Destination: storage closet. I stared at Hana. She stared back. We tested it. Hana stepped outside the apartment. I changed her access category from guest to exterior visitor. She came back in and opened the wooden door. Mop. Broken umbrella. Spider. The original closet had returned. I walked over and opened the same door while Hana stood beside me. Luxury bedroom. She opened it. Closet. I opened it. Bedroom. We spent 10 full minutes taking turns because it was the funniest thing either of us had ever seen. Then Deposit walked through the closed wooden door without opening it. He simply vanished into the wood and reappeared on the bedroom side according to the security monitor. I stopped laughing. Hana added "cat ignores dimensional permissions" to the notes. Saturday morning, my landlord arrived carrying a clipboard and the exhausted expression of a man who had already inspected 3 student apartments. His name was Mr. Bay. He was in his late 50s, wore sandals in every season, and treated building maintenance like a personal duel against entropy. He tested the smoke detector. He checked the bathroom faucet. He looked under the sink. Then he opened the wooden door. Closet? I stood behind him, sweating so hard I probably increased the apartment humidity. Mr. B.A. looked at the mop, umbrella, and spider. The spider had somehow returned too. I had no idea whether it was the original spider or an apartment-generated actor. Mr. B.A. nodded, closed the door, and told me I should clean more often. I thanked him for the advice while feeling like I had just defeated a raid boss. Then Deposit chose that exact moment to walk out through the closed door. Not through the doorway, through the wooden panel. His head emerged first, then his shoulders, then the rest of him, as if the door were fog. Mr. B.A. saw everything. My soul left my body. Deposit landed on the floor, stretched, and looked up at the landlord. Mr. B stared at the cat. He stared at the door. He opened it. Closet. He closed it. Deposit rubbed against his leg. Mr. B.A. looked at me for a long time. Then he said old buildings were weird and left. I had never respected a man more. The security room solved one problem, but it created another. Now I knew the apartment understood the difference between residents, guests, and strangers. So I rang the lobby bell and asked how someone became a permanent resident. The answer card said, "Live here by choice. Receive a key. Sleep here 7 nights." I looked at the brass key hooks behind the desk. 24 hooks were empty. One held a key labeled King Minyo. Another held a tiny tag labeled Deposit. But instead of a key, it had a small golden fish charm. That meant the apartment could support at least 24 more permanent residents. I immediately decided this information would never reach Dongsuk. A week later, Dongsuk found out anyway. Not the magic apartment part, the successful food business part. He was my friend from economics class, a large, cheerful guy who believed every minor achievement deserved a celebration involving fried chicken. He saw the line outside my kiosk and decided I had become a secret millionaire. I explained that I was making enough to cover expenses. He asked for a job. I said no. He offered to work for food. I said that sounded illegal. He offered to work for entrepreneurial experience and unlimited brownies. Hana, who had been standing nearby, told me we actually needed help carrying stock. That was how Dongsuk became employee number 1 of Midnight Foods without knowing where Midnight Foods got its food. Every morning I brought sealed crates out of my apartment before he arrived. He helped transport them to the kiosk. He handled customers, made jokes, and somehow doubled sales because half the campus knew him. For 3 days, everything worked. On the 4th day, he arrived at my building 40 minutes early. I was halfway through carrying crates from the internal convenience store to the studio when he knocked. I panicked. Instead of setting the crate down and opening the front door like a normal person, I tried to kick the bedroom door shut behind me while holding 6 boxes of sandwiches. My foot slipped. The door remained open. Dong-suk knocked again. Deposit appeared, jumped onto the top crate, and caused the entire stack to collapse. Sandwiches slid across the floor. I stepped on a wrapped brownie, lost my balance, and fell backward through the magic doorway just as Dong-suk tried the unlocked front door. He walked into my studio. He saw my legs sticking out of a luxury bedroom that should not exist. There are moments in life when a clever lie can save you. This was not one of them. Dong-suk stepped through the door. He looked at the enormous bedroom. He looked back at the tiny studio. Then he screamed. Not in fear, in joy. He sprinted past me before I could stop him. He discovered the gym, then the cinema, then the pool, then the bowling alley. I chased him through the halls while Hana, who had arrived behind him, calmly closed the front door and activated guest mode. Dong-suk reached the convenience store and nearly cried. Then he found the brownie shelf. That was the moment I knew the secret was over. I forced him to sit in the lobby while Hana explained the rules. We made him swear not to tell anyone. We explained that if the apartment became public knowledge, my life would be destroyed by reporters, scientists, government offices, real estate agents, and probably my landlord's rent calculator. Dong-suk listened seriously. Then he asked whether the gym membership was free. I should have expected that. He became a regular guest, not a resident. Hana refused to let him sleep over 7 nights because nobody wanted to test whether his refrigerator basement dream would become architectural reality. The rooms kept coming. Room 40 was a dance studio. Room 41 was a craft room. Room 42 was a tiny theater stage with curtains and spotlights. Room 43 was a refrigerated storage room. Room 44 was a giant freezer. Room 45 was a wine cellar with no wine. Dong-suk called it the saddest room. Room 46 was a cleaning supply room. Room 47 changed my entire strategy. It was an elevator lobby. Until then, getting from my studio to the deepest rooms had become annoying. The path to the convenience store required 3 hallways, 1 staircase, and crossing the edge of the bowling alley. I had taped arrows to the walls. Hana's map looked like someone had dropped noodles onto graph paper. The new elevator had a polished metal door and a touch screen instead of floor buttons. The screen listed every room: bedroom, gym, cinema, pool, kitchen, lobby, security. All 47. I pressed cinema. The doors closed. My stomach shifted for half a second. The doors opened directly into the cinema. There was no elevator entrance there before. Now there was. I went back to the lobby and selected Original Studio. The elevator opened behind a new narrow door beside my refrigerator. From outside visitor mode, that door looked like an electrical cabinet. I almost kissed the elevator floor. My magical mansion finally had fast travel. We immediately used it for logistics. Crates moved from convenience store to studio in seconds. The apartment map became manageable. The elevator even had a service mode that opened into larger rooms with double doors. Then Dong-suk discovered the voice command function. He stepped inside and said, "Take me to paradise." The elevator doors closed. The screen displayed searching. Hana and I stared. The doors opened. Room 20. The massage chair room. Dong-suk pointed at the elevator as if it had proven his religion. The elevator understood vibes. That became dangerous very quickly. Take me somewhere cold. Open the freezer. Take me somewhere I can scream. Open the music studio. Take me somewhere romantic. Open the koi garden. At which point Hana silently pressed lobby and left me behind. I never used that command again. Room 48 was an indoor loading bay attached to the garage. Still no exterior access. Room 49 was a package room. This room had hundreds of parcel lockers and 1 conveyor belt disappearing into a square opening in the wall. I placed an empty box on the belt. It vanished. A screen asked for destination room. I selected kitchen. The box disappeared with a soft whoosh. We took the elevator to the kitchen. The box was sitting on the counter. Hana's eyes changed. That was the expression she made when she discovered a way to optimize something. Within a day, she had connected our entire food operation to the package room. We stopped carrying crates through hallways. We loaded them onto the conveyor, selected Original Studio, and picked them up near the front door. Then we discovered the parcel lockers could accept deliveries sent from any internal room. I put my dirty laundry into a locker in the bedroom, selected laundry room, and it arrived there. I sent textbooks from the library to my office. I sent Chairman Quack from the pool to the lobby. He arrived safely, but looked emotionally unchanged. Deposit entered one locker voluntarily. I selected Cat Kingdom. The locker closed. 5 seconds later, the Cat Kingdom security camera showed Deposit stepping out of a wall compartment like a tiny orange businessman arriving for work. From that day on, he used the package system more than anyone. Room 50 was the first room that generated actual staff. At midnight, the new door opened into a hotel housekeeping closet. Inside stood a round white robot on wheels. It was about waist high, had 2 folding arms, a screen for a face, and a little black bow tie printed on its chest. Its screen displayed a smiling expression. Then it looked around at the 3 of us. A line of text appeared. Housekeeping Unit H01 ready. I had dreamed of many things in my life. A stable career, financial freedom, a girlfriend. Never once had I dreamed of receiving a robot butler from a dimensional apartment. Apparently my imagination had been too small. I named him Mr. Clean, because Dong-suk wanted to call him RoboCop, and Hana refused to let either of us choose something worse. Mr. Clean immediately rolled away. We followed. He cleaned the lobby, then the bedroom, then the cinema, then the kitchen, then the bowling alley. He worked without complaint, recharged through a wall port, and automatically used the package system to move supplies. My biggest problem had quietly become cleaning nearly 50 rooms, and the apartment had solved it before I realized how bad the problem was. I felt grateful. Then Mr. Clean entered my original studio. He stopped. His screen changed from a smile to a horrified face. He scanned the floor. Laundry, instant noodle cups, textbooks, 3 socks that did not belong together, a chair covered in jackets, 1 plate I had forgotten under the bed. His screen displayed a single word: unacceptable. Then he began cleaning with the intensity of a military operation. He threw open drawers. He sorted clothes. He vacuumed under furniture. He removed expired sauce packets I had been saving since freshman orientation. When I tried to stop him from throwing away an empty cookie tin because it could be useful, he gently pushed me out of the room with 1 mechanical arm. I was evicted from my own studio by a robot maid. 20 minutes later, the place looked better than the day I moved in. Mr. Clean rolled back into the magic doorway. His screen smiled again. I felt like I had disappointed my mother. On day 51, another housekeeping robot appeared, then one on day 52. For the first time, the apartment repeated a room type. The physical room itself was a second housekeeping station, and inside was H02. The resident guide gained a new note. Large properties require maintenance. I looked at the growing map. That was the first time the phrase large property made me nervous, because I had been thinking of the apartment as a weird collection of rooms. The apartment was beginning to think of itself as an estate. At 60 rooms, it would already rival a mansion. At 100, it would be a private resort. At 365, I had no idea what word would even apply. But before I could worry about day 365, I had to survive day 53, because day 53 gave Dong-suk exactly what we had been trying to prevent. A room full of refrigerators. Not 1 refrigerator. Not 10. Hundreds. Rows and rows of glowing glass door refrigerators stretched into the distance like a supermarket designed by a caffeine demon. Every single one was empty. Dong-suk walked into the room with tears in his eyes. He turned to me and whispered that the apartment understood him. I pointed out that he did not live here. Hana checked the lobby records. Dong-suk was still listed as guest, and we realized the truth. The apartment did not require permanent residency to respond to someone. It only needed enough exposure to their preferences. Dong-suk had spent nearly every afternoon in my home for 3 weeks. He had talked about refrigerators constantly. The apartment had listened. We stared down the endless cold aisle. At the far end, 1 refrigerator light flickered on. Inside was a single can of energy drink. Dong-seok screamed so loudly that Mr. Clean arrived with a first aid kit. I picked up the can. A second one appeared behind it. Hana slowly covered her face with both hands. I knew exactly what she was thinking. Our careful, reasonable little food business had just gained infinite caffeine, and Dong-seok had just become the most dangerous man in Seoul. The infinite energy drink lasted exactly 4 days before Hana banned Dong-seok from taking more than 2 cans outside the apartment. This was not because the drink was dangerous. It was because Dong-seok drank 6 on the first day, reorganized our entire kiosk inventory by color, challenged the gym treadmill to a race, lost, recovered, then spent 3 hours trying to teach Deposit how to high-five. Deposit responded by biting him once and going to sleep. The second day was worse. Dong-seok decided Midnight Foods needed brand expansion. Without telling us, he gave free cans to a campus dance club. They loved them. The dance club gave cans to the basketball team. The basketball team told the gaming club. By lunch, students were lining up at our kiosk asking for the mysterious silver drink that supposedly tasted better than every convenience store brand. There was one problem. The cans had no label. The apartment-generated energy drink came in plain silver aluminum with a tiny lightning bolt. No ingredients list. No manufacturer. No nutrition facts. No barcode. Selling it would be a fantastic way to invite questions from authorities who did not accept my hallway made it as a supplier declaration, so I refused to sell it. This somehow made it more popular. People assumed it was an exclusive test product. Someone posted a photo online calling it Ghost Energy. Someone else claimed it was imported from Finland. A third person said their cousin worked at a major beverage company and knew it was part of a secret launch. Their cousin was lying. The internet did not care. By the end of the week, my little campus kiosk had a line of students trying to buy a product I legally could not admit existed. I solved the problem in the most mature way possible. I hid every can inside the refrigerator room and told Dong-seok that if he removed one without permission, I would change his apartment access mode to exterior visitor. He looked genuinely devastated. The threat worked. Then room 54 gave us a bottling lab. I opened the door and just stood there. Stainless steel mixing tanks, filling equipment, label printers, bottle washers, capping machines, a small quality testing station, shelves of empty approved-looking food containers. Hana entered behind me, took one slow breath, and said the apartment was enabling us. She was right. We still could not legally sell a mystery magical drink with no traceable source, but now we could develop ordinary beverages using normal ingredients we could document. Tea, coffee, flavored milk, lemonade. We could produce small quantities through a registered kitchen and keep records like a real business. The magical part stayed hidden in the background, reducing our costs. So that is what we did. Hana handled the paperwork. I developed recipes. Dong-seok volunteered to taste test everything until we explained that taste testing did not mean drinking 2 liters of every prototype. Our first bottled product was a cold milk tea. I made the original batch in the cafe, registered it with the convenience store, and used infinite copies as our internal stock. For anything leaving the apartment, we transferred it into proper labeled bottles with real ingredient information and kept sales deliberately small. We were not trying to conquer the beverage industry. We were trying to pay tuition without summoning an auditor with supernatural investigative instincts. Room 55 was a lecture hall. It had 80 seats, a projector, a podium, and absolutely no reason to exist in a home. I used it to practice a class presentation in front of Deposit and 3 housekeeping robots. Deposit left halfway through. H02 displayed a sleeping face. I still got an A-. Room 56 was a tiny courtroom. We held a fake trial accusing Dong-seok of stealing brownies. The evidence was overwhelming because he was eating one during the trial. Room 57 was a karaoke room. Room 58 was a larger karaoke room. Room 59 was a soundproof screaming room with padded walls. That one arrived during exam week and immediately became the most popular room among my friends. Even Hana used it once. She entered calmly, closed the door, screamed for 8 seconds, came out, fixed her hair, and returned to studying. I never asked what happened in there. Room 60 was a control center. This room looked like the bridge of a spaceship. Huge screens displayed the apartment map in 3 dimensions. Every room appeared as a glowing box connected by halls, elevators, stairs, and service passages. I could zoom out and rotate the structure. That was when I discovered something impossible, even by my apartment's standards. The rooms were not arranged inside a larger invisible building. They were folded. The bedroom sat physically behind my studio door, but the gym existed at an angle that made no geometric sense. The pool overlapped the cinema on the map without touching it. The garage passed through the space occupied by the library. The elevator shaft bent sideways, doubled back, and then crossed itself. It looked less like architecture and more like a plate of transparent noodles. A counter in the corner showed total interior floor area. 6,812 square meters. I read the number twice. My original studio was 12. In 2 months, my apartment had become more than 500 times larger inside than outside. Dong-suk asked if that meant we could technically call my home a castle. Hana said no. I asked what the legal definition of a castle was. Hana told me to stop helping him. The control center also showed energy and water usage. External building draw. Normal studio baseline. Internal systems. Closed supply. That explained why my landlord had not received an electricity bill large enough to achieve consciousness. The rooms powered themselves. Water circulated internally. Heating and cooling were self-contained. Even the pool did not affect the building meter. I celebrated for 12 minutes. Then I noticed another display. Occupancy capacity, 312. Current permanent residence, 2. Me and deposit. Guest load, 2. Expansion status, stable. Next structural threshold, 100 rooms. There was no explanation for what structural threshold meant. I rang the lobby bell. The answer card said, milestone reward. I asked what reward? The card said, surprise. I wrote that I hated surprises. The drawer returned a card with a little smiley face. My apartment was becoming sarcastic. Around this time, my money problem finally transformed into a money management problem. Midnight Foods was doing well enough that Hana forced me to hire an accountant. A real one? An ordinary human accountant who knew absolutely nothing about magical architecture. This created a new challenge because our cost of goods was suspiciously low. We solved that by purchasing a reasonable documented amount of raw ingredients from outside suppliers and using apartment ingredients only to cover testing, staff meals, mistakes, waste, and the difference between what we sold and what we could plausibly produce. In other words, we intentionally made less profit so our business would look normal. It was painful. I would stand inside my infinite pantry, looking at endless free rice, then go online and order sacks of rice with real invoices. Chairman Quack watched from the counter. I told him this was called compliance. He squeaked because I accidentally leaned on him. I interpreted that as support. Then I met Seo Jaeho. Every university has at least one student who looks like he arrived from a completely different genre. Jaeho was ours. He was tall, handsome, rich, always perfectly dressed, and drove a sports car to an 8 a.m. lecture, which I considered an act of violence against everyone who took the bus. His family owned cafes, hotels, or construction companies depending on which rumor you believed. He was president of the Entrepreneurship Club and had the natural confidence of someone who had never checked his bank balance before ordering extra cheese. He visited my kiosk because Midnight Foods had become popular. He bought a milk tea. He drank it. Then he asked who manufactured it. I gave him the name of our registered small production partner, which technically handled our external packaging. He asked where the recipe was developed. I said in my kitchen. He looked at me. I immediately realized this answer was dangerous because half the campus knew I lived in a microscopic studio. He asked whether I was hiding a commercial test kitchen somewhere. I laughed too loudly. He smiled. I disliked that smile instantly. Not because he seemed evil. He did not. He seemed entertained. That was worse. Jaeho became obsessed with figuring out how my tiny business produced such consistent food. He started visiting the kiosk. He joined Dong-suk for lunch. He offered business advice I did not ask for. He even invited me to pitch Midnight Foods at a student startup event. I refused. Hana accepted on my behalf. She said we needed legitimate visibility if we wanted to keep growing. I said visibility was exactly what I did not want. She reminded me I could not spend my life carrying sandwiches out of a magical closet while pretending this was a sustainable career plan. I looked at Chairman Quack. He had nothing. The startup event was held in a university auditorium. 10 student businesses competed for a small grant and a mentorship package. I had to stand on stage in front of judges and explain midnight foods without mentioning unlimited ingredients, infinite storage, dimensional conveyors, robot housekeepers, or the fact that our headquarters could physically swallow the auditorium. This was difficult. I kept the pitch simple. Affordable student food, efficient small batch production, limited menu, strong customer feedback, low waste. All true. Technically. Then a judge asked about our unusually low waste rate. I said we used careful inventory forecasting. Hana stared at me from the audience because our actual forecasting method was put leftovers back on the magical shelf and watch them stop mattering. Another judge asked if we planned to open a cafe. I said maybe. Jeho, sitting 3 seats away, smiled again. We won second place. The grant was enough to rent a tiny commercial storefront near campus. I should have been excited. Instead, I realized something horrifying. A real storefront meant we needed a real kitchen, staff schedule, stock deliveries, health inspections, receipts, and all the other normal things I had been avoiding by operating a kiosk. The apartment answered my stress at midnight. Room 67 was a logistics office. Room 68 was a commercial kitchen. Room 69 was a mock storefront. Room 70 was a staff training room. 4 useful rooms in a row. Hana saw the pattern immediately. The apartment was reacting to major needs. Random rooms still appeared, but when I had a strong ongoing problem, the next few rooms often helped solve it. This sounded amazing. It was not always amazing, because human thoughts are not clean. One night before Room 71 appeared, I was exhausted from planning the cafe and jokingly told Dong-suk that I wished I could duplicate myself. At midnight, the new room was a hall of mirrors. We stood outside it for 20 minutes. Nobody wanted to enter first. Finally, Mr. Clean rolled inside. Nothing happened. I entered. Nothing happened. It was literally just a hall of mirrors. I laughed in relief. Then my reflection on the left moved half a second late. I stopped. It stopped. I raised my hand. It raised its hand. I turned away. It tapped the glass. I ran out so fast I knocked over Dong-suk. We sealed Room 71 with caution tape. Hana marked it "Do not use until we understand why Minyo's reflection is rude." 3 days later we tested it again and everything was normal. The apartment never explained. I stopped saying I wanted to duplicate myself. Room 72 was a laundromat. Room 73 was an indoor playground. Room 74 was a small chapel-like meditation room with no religious symbols. Room 75 was a costume storage room filled with empty racks. Room 76 was a recording booth. Room 77 was a podcast studio. Dong-suk immediately launched a show called Refrigerator Talk. Episode 1 lasted 19 minutes and consisted mostly of him ranking frozen dumplings. We deleted it. Then Hana's dorm ceiling collapsed. It sounds dramatic, but nobody was hurt. A pipe leaked, soaked the drywall, and dropped a wet chunk of ceiling directly onto her desk during class. Her laptop was with her, but her books, bedding, and half her clothes got soaked. The dorm office moved her into a temporary room shared with 3 other students. Hana lasted 1 night. The next morning she arrived at my apartment carrying a suitcase and the expression of a general returning from a failed campaign. She asked if she could stay for a few days until the repairs were done. I said yes before thinking about the 7-night rule. She slept in one of the empty guest bedrooms that had appeared around day 65. By then I had 5 separate bedrooms, not counting mine. The apartment clearly expected company. Night 1 passed. Night 2. Night 3. On night 4, Room 80 appeared as a quiet reading room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a huge desk exactly like the one Hana had always said she wanted. She stared at it suspiciously. On night 5, we got a planning room with wall-sized digital calendars. On night 6, a data room filled with screens and analysis software. Hana became more suspicious. I remembered the rule at 11:48 p.m. On night 7, I sprinted to the guest bedroom. Hana was already in pajamas, sitting on the bed reading. I told her she had slept here 6 nights. She looked at the clock. Then she looked at me. Then we both realized we had no idea whether 7 nights meant 7 completed sleeps, 7 midnights, or 7 calendar dates. We ran to the lobby. Her name was already printed on a brass key. Yoon Hana, permanent resident. She slowly removed the key from its hook. The resident guide gained a new line. Welcome home. Hana stared at the words. I expected anger. Instead, she looked weirdly quiet. Her dorm had always been temporary. Her parents lived several hours away. She spent most of her time on campus, in libraries, or helping me with the business. Somehow, without planning it, my impossible apartment had become the place where she kept spare clothes, where she ate dinner, where she studied, where deposits slept on her notes, and where she knew which elevator button to press without looking. She said she would move out again once the dorm was repaired. The resident guide produced a card. Keys remain valid unless resident chooses to leave permanently. Hana folded the card and put it in her pocket. She did not say anything else. At midnight, room 81 appeared. It was an operations center, not my chaotic spaceship control room. This one was pure Hana. Clean desks, massive whiteboards, inventory screens, scheduling tools, financial dashboards, a wall displaying every room, every robot, every stock system, every active guest permission, every business delivery moving through the internal package network. In the center was a chair with a small brass nameplate. Manager Yoon. I laughed so hard I had to hold the doorway. Hana did not laugh. She sat in the chair. Every screen turned on. A calm electronic tone sounded. The apartment map reorganized itself. For the first time since this began, all our messy arrows, maps, notes, spreadsheets, inventory systems, room lists, and schedules synchronized in one place. Hana touched the main screen and discovered she could assign cleaning routes to robots, change guest access, schedule room maintenance, send packages, monitor supplies, and even rename internal zones. She looked back at me. I stopped laughing. Power had changed hands. Within an hour, she divided my home into districts. Residential wing, recreation wing, food production wing, storage wing, guest wing, utility wing, questionable wing. Room 71 went into questionable wing by itself. She changed Dong-suk's elevator permission so voice commands no longer worked after 10 p.m. He called it tyranny. She called it sleep hygiene. She gave Mr. Clean priority access to the package network. She set a notification if any exterior visitor opened the studio closet. She created emergency routes in case someone got lost. She even found a function that let residents request directional arrows on the floor. Suddenly, glowing lines appeared whenever I selected a destination. I had been living in a magical mansion for almost 3 months and never found that feature. Hana found it in 37 minutes. That was the night I realized the apartment had not just gained another resident. It had gained an administrator. And somewhere deep inside the impossible halls, I swear I heard the building relax. Hana's first act as permanent manager was to ban me from pressing unlabeled buttons without supervision. Her second act was to create a budget. I considered the first act unfair and the second one cruel. The apartment generated almost everything we needed internally, but the outside world still expected money for rent, taxes, packaging, staff, licenses, internet service, university fees, and the terrible invention known as printer ink. Our new cafe storefront was almost ready, and Hana had calculated exactly how much legitimate revenue we needed to keep everything boring enough that nobody became curious. That became our strategy. Boring on the outside, ridiculous on the inside. The storefront we rented was only 28 square meters. It had 6 tables, a narrow counter, one tiny prep area, and a back room barely large enough for boxes. Jaeho visited during renovation and looked disappointed. He had expected some ambitious flagship cafe. Instead, he found me assembling cheap chairs with an instruction sheet upside down. He asked how I planned to supply the place during lunch rush. I told him efficiently. That word had saved me before. It saved me again. What Jaeho did not know was that every morning at 6, Hana and I loaded prepared food into the package room inside my apartment. The system sent everything to the original studio. We carried it downstairs in ordinary crates, loaded a small used van we had bought, and drove it 3 blocks to the cafe. The van spent more time being loaded than driving. I could have walked faster. Businesses looked more legitimate when boxes arrived in vehicles instead of emerging from the backpack of a sleepy student. Room 82 was a coffee roasting room. We did not use it commercially because we wanted traceable beans. But I learned to roast coffee for fun and accidentally became unbearable for 4 days. I started describing smells as nutty and bright. Dong-suk poured instant coffee into my handmade cup just to hurt me. Room 83 was a miniature indoor farm. Unlike the greenhouse, this one had hydroponic racks, grow lights, water controls, and trays ready for vegetables. The apartment did not create seeds, but Anything we planted grew absurdly well. I planted lettuce. 3 days later, it looked like it had been training for a bodybuilding competition. Hana measured it twice. The growth rate was roughly 5 times normal. We immediately decided not to sell any of it. A magical pantry was easy to hide because nobody saw the source. A lettuce head the size of a toddler was harder to explain. Dong-suk named the largest one General Lettuce and drew a face on the outer leaf. Deposit 8 part of the face. Room 84 was a seed vault. Empty. Room 85 was a gardening workshop. Room 86 was a flower room. Room 87 was a small indoor forest. That one shocked us. I opened the door expecting another greenhouse. Instead, I found a winding path under real-looking trees. Soft daylight filtered through a sky that did not exist. Birds could be heard, although we never found any. A stream ran beside mossy rocks and disappeared into the ground. The room was bigger than a city park. The control center listed it as 9,400 square meters. One room had just double the total area of my home. I walked for 20 minutes and never reached the far wall. Hana dropped a tracking marker at the entrance and told everyone not to explore alone until we mapped it. Dong-suk asked whether camping counted as living there. We told him no camping. He asked whether a tent counted as a temporary refrigerator. We told him to leave. Room 88 was an observatory. The ceiling opened onto a perfect night sky even at noon. The telescope could zoom in farther than any amateur telescope I had seen. When Hana checked the star patterns, they matched the real sky above Seoul for our date and time. Except there was no light pollution. I asked how an observatory inside a 4th-floor apartment could see around the planet's atmosphere. Hana said that was not even in the top 10 questions anymore. Room 89 was a planetarium. Room 90 was a museum gallery with empty display cases. I put Chairman Quack in the largest case with a handwritten card reading Founding Financial Advisor. Mr. Clean removed him and returned him to the pool. Apparently the robot respected museums. Then the cafe opened. We called it Midnight Corner, mostly because everything in my life had become accidentally themed around midnight. The menu was deliberately small. Milk tea, coffee, egg sandwiches, toast, brownies, and one rotating rice bowl. The prices were student-friendly. The interior was simple. Hana managed operations. Dong-suk worked part-time. I handled food prep, recipe testing, and whatever emergency required the person with the magical apartment. Opening morning. 47 people lined up before the doors opened. I nearly locked the cafe and ran away. Hana physically turned me around and pointed me back toward the counter. The first rush hit like a wave. Orders printed non-stop. Dong-suk shouted numbers. Milk foamed. Sandwiches disappeared. Someone dropped a tray. A student asked for 7 brownies and then changed it to 9. Our card terminal froze for 13 seconds and I saw death. But we had a hidden advantage. We could not magically teleport food directly into the public cafe. That would be too obvious. But we had pre-packed far more stock than any normal 28 square meter cafe could store. The used van outside was full. When supplies ran low, I walked out carrying an empty crate, opened the van, swapped it for a full one, and returned. Nobody knew the van itself had been loaded from a storage system larger than a supermarket. By afternoon, we had sold almost everything we had planned for the entire day. Hana told me to stop restocking. I asked why. She pointed at the line. If we served infinite customers with 3 employees in a closet-sized kitchen, people would notice. So at 4 p.m., we put up a sold-out sign. Students complained. I felt terrible. Hana looked delighted. Scarcity made the cafe seem popular. That was when I learned business is occasionally just disappointing people in a strategic way. Jae-ho came in at 3:52 and bought the final brownie. He sat at a corner table, ate it slowly, and watched our operation. I could feel his curiosity from across the room. After closing, he offered to invest. I refused immediately. He asked, what if he funded a second location? I refused again. He asked what if he only wanted 10%. I told him the problem was not the percentage. The problem was that investment came with questions. He smiled and said questions were free. I told him that was exactly why they were dangerous. He laughed. Unfortunately, that made me like him slightly more. Our real disaster happened 3 days later. A food delivery supplier arrived early at my apartment building. We had ordered legitimate flour, milk, coffee beans, packaging, and other outside materials. Normally the driver called first. and I met him downstairs. This driver did not call. He carried 2 boxes up to Unit 404 and knocked. I was in the shower room 50 meters and 1 elevator jump away. Hana was at class. Dong-suk was working at the cafe. Mr. Clean detected the knock through the security system. Then, for reasons I still do not understand, he decided to answer the door. I had never given the robot's exterior visitor interaction permission. Apparently Hana had enabled receive parcels that morning. The security recording later showed exactly what happened. My front door opened by itself. The delivery driver saw no human. He looked down. Mr. Clean rolled forward wearing his little printed bow tie. His screen showed a smile. The driver stared. Mr. Clean extended both arms and took the boxes. The driver handed them over automatically because human beings are strangely cooperative when confused. Then Mr. Clean displayed thank you and closed the door. The driver stood in the hallway for 15 full seconds. He took out his phone. My security alert reached me at the same time. I sprinted from the shower wearing sweatpants, wet hair, and no shirt. I reached the studio just as someone knocked again. I opened the door. The driver asked if I had a robot. I looked behind me. Mr. Clean was gone. The wooden closet door was closed. I told him he must have seen my vacuum. He asked if my vacuum had arms. I said it was expensive. He stared at me. I stared at him. Then Deposit walked through the wooden closet door. The driver looked at the cat. He looked at the door. He looked at me. I expected screaming. Instead, he slowly nodded and said technology was amazing now. Then he left. Seoul was protecting my secret through a powerful combination of politeness and people being too tired to investigate weird things. We changed the robot permissions immediately. Room 91 was a parcel reception office. Of course it was. The apartment apparently considered the problem solved. Room 92 was a mail room. Room 93 was a print shop. Room 94 was an art studio. Room 95 was a pottery room. I made one bowl. It leaned left so aggressively that soup would have escaped. Hana used it to hold paper clips. Room 96 was a fencing hall. Dong-suk and I put on protective gear and fought with practice swords until Hana entered and asked why 2 business owners were trying to destroy each other before payroll. Room 97 was a dojo. Room 98 was a climbing gym. Room 99 was a giant empty banquet hall. The control center flashed a message. 1 room until structural threshold. Everyone came over for room 100. Even Jae-ho almost ruined it. He had invited himself to the cafe after closing that evening and asked why we were all leaving exactly at 11:30. I told him we had a movie night. He asked what movie. I named the first title that came into my head. It turned out that movie was not in theaters anymore. He asked where we were watching it. I said my place. His eyes lit up. I immediately realized my mistake. He said he wanted to join. I told him my place was too small. He reminded me that Dong-suk was twice his width and apparently fit. Dong-suk looked offended. Hana saved us by saying it was a private business meeting. Jae-ho finally left, but he looked more suspicious than ever. At 11:58, the 4 of us gathered in the control center. Me, Hana, Dong-suk, and Deposit. The housekeeping robots lined up behind us because Dong-suk had insisted they were part of the family. Chairman Quack sat on the console wearing a paper crown. The counter read 99 rooms. 11:59. I watched the seconds change. Midnight. Ding. Every light in the control center went dark. Then the apartment shook. Not violently. More like a giant machine starting somewhere far away. The floor hummed beneath my feet. Lines of light raced across the 3-dimensional map. Existing corridors shifted. Elevator connections multiplied. Staircases appeared and disappeared. Entire room clusters rotated into new positions. Dong-suk grabbed the console. Hana shouted at everyone to stay where they were. Deposit sat down and began washing one paw. The cat had experienced 99 supernatural renovations and was no longer impressed by reality. A new structure formed at the center of the map. It was enormous. Room 100. The Grand Hall. The control center doors opened automatically. A glowing path appeared on the floor. We followed it into the elevator. The screen did not ask for a destination. It simply displayed milestone access. The doors closed. When they opened, I forgot how to breathe. The Grand Hall looked like the entrance of a royal palace. White stone columns rose 4 stories high. Twin staircases curved upward beneath a glass-like ceiling showing a bright blue sky. Chandeliers hung over polished floors. Balconies wrapped around the upper levels. Fountains ran along both sides. At the far end stood a massive set of golden doors. Dongseok whispered that we definitely had a castle now. This time Hana did not correct him. A brass plaque stood in the center of the floor. Property tier upgraded. Residence class. Estate. Primary hub unlocked. Resident facilities expanded. Exterior footprint unchanged. I read that last line with enormous relief. Then the golden doors opened. Behind them was a transport gallery. Dozens of doors lined a circular chamber. Each door had a screen. I touched one and a list of rooms appeared. This was not just another elevator. It was a portal network. Any door in the gallery could connect directly to any internal room. I selected the original studio. The door opened. My tiny bed, fridge, and kitchenette were directly on the other side. No travel time. No elevator. No corridor. I closed it, selected indoor forest, and opened it again. Trees. I selected pool, water, and deck chairs. I selected garage, concrete, and my insulting brick wall exit. Dongseok immediately began shouting destinations and running through doors like a child in an amusement park. Hana sat down on the nearest bench because her operations map had just become obsolete. Then another message appeared on the plaque. Exterior anchor capacity increased. 2. I did not understand. Hana did. She looked at the original studio door on the network display. One exterior anchor already existed. Unit 404. Now we had capacity for a second. The apartment could connect to another door somewhere outside. I rang the lobby bell so hard the drawer opened before I finished. I wrote, "Can we create another entrance outside this apartment?" "Yes." "Where?" "Owned or lawfully controlled enclosed space." I stared at Hana. She stared at me. Our cafe had a back storage room, a private enclosed space we legally rented. Suddenly, our biggest logistics problem had a possible solution so perfect it felt criminal, even though the magical rule specifically said lawfully controlled. At 12:40 a.m., we drove to Midnight Corner. Hana carried the brass key the lobby had produced for anchor setup. I carried a toolbox because I thought tools made us look like we knew what we were doing. Dongseok carried Chairman Quack because he said every expansion needed executive oversight. We entered the cafe's back storage room and closed the door. There was one blank wall behind a metal shelf. Hana held the brass key against it. A keyhole appeared in the wall. I nearly dropped the toolbox. She inserted the key and turned it. A narrow wooden door materialized behind the shelf. From inside the cafe, it looked like a normal storage cabinet. I opened it. The grand hall stood on the other side. I could see the fountains. I could see the chandeliers. I could see Dongseok, who had stepped through another portal from my apartment and was now waving both arms like an idiot. Our cafe and my studio were now connected internally, even though they sat 3 blocks apart. Outside, the city remained normal. Inside, the distance had become 4 steps. Hana leaned against the wall and started laughing. I had never heard her laugh like that before. Not a polite laugh, not an amused breath. Full, helpless laughter. Because after 3 months of carrying crates downstairs, loading a van, driving through traffic, unloading, restocking, and pretending our business had ordinary logistics, our entire delivery route had just been destroyed by a magic door behind a shelf. The next morning, I woke up in my giant bed, walked through the grand hall, opened the cafe anchor, and arrived at work in under 1 minute. Dongseok called it the world's shortest commute. I called it beautiful. Hana called it a security nightmare and installed 3 permission layers before breakfast. Then she noticed something on the Grand Hall plaque that none of us had seen the night before. Property tier. Estate. Next tier threshold. 200 rooms. Reward preview. Exterior functions. I read those 2 words several times. Exterior functions. The outside of my apartment had not changed in 100 days. Apparently, at 200, something about that rule might change. I should have been worried. Instead, I looked at the tiny cafe door now opening into a palace hall, then at Chairman Quack sitting on the front desk like he had planned all of this. And I thought the same dangerous thought that had caused most of my problems so far. How ridiculous could this get? The answer was more ridiculous almost immediately. Room 101 was a coat check. After the palace-sized grand hall, I expected every new room to become more impressive. Instead, the apartment gave me a room where guests could leave jackets. I felt humbled. Room 102 was a shoe room. Room 103 was an umbrella room. Hana said the estate had clearly entered its basic hospitality era. Then room 104 was an indoor go-kart track. The humility ended. The track twisted through a warehouse-sized chamber with ramps, tunnels, hairpin corners, pit lanes, electronic lap timing, and 12 electric carts parked at the start line. Jaeho discovered the apartment 2 days later because of those go-karts. This was mostly Dongsuk's fault. To celebrate the cafe's first profitable month, Jaeho brought us a bottle of expensive sparkling juice, because none of us were old enough to make the celebration interesting. We closed the cafe late. Hana and I still needed to move several boxes through the hidden anchor in the storage room. Normally we waited until everyone else left. Dongsuk forgot Jaeho was in the bathroom. He opened the anchor door, carried 2 crates through, and shouted that he was going to beat my lap record before bed. Jaeho came out of the bathroom in time to see the storage door closing on a view of marble columns and a fountain. He did not call out. He did not panic. He simply opened it. Guest access should have shown him a normal storage cabinet. Unfortunately, we had temporarily added him to staff permissions that afternoon, so he could help move furniture without setting off the cafe alarm. Staff permissions counted as guest permissions. The door opened into the grand hall. Jaeho stepped through. Hana saw him on the operations screen and said a word I had never heard her say before. By the time we intercepted him, he had made it to the go-kart track. Dongsuk was already fastening a helmet onto his head. I expected accusations, questions, maybe a dramatic speech about how I had deceived him. Jaeho tightened the chin strap and asked which cart was fastest. That was how our greatest secrecy threat became our 4th driver. For the next 40 minutes, we raced around the impossible track. Jaeho drove exactly how I expected a rich guy with a sports car to drive. Annoyingly well. He beat my lap time by 3 seconds. I accused his family of funding professional kart lessons. He said he had raced since he was 9. Of course he had. Afterward, we made him sit in the lobby and explained everything from day one. He listened without interrupting, which somehow made me more nervous. When I finished, he asked one question. Did the apartment charge rent by square meter? I said no. He leaned back and said that was the most powerful supernatural ability he had ever heard of. I liked him a lot more after that. Hana made him sign an actual non-disclosure agreement. The agreement probably had no useful clause for dimensional magic, but it made her feel better. Jaeho became a guest. Unlike Dongsuk, he did not immediately demand unlimited snacks. He spent hours exploring the architecture, asking about the rules, measuring rooms, and staring at the control center. Then he discovered the garage. I knew I was in trouble the moment he saw the 6 empty parking spaces and mechanic equipment. He asked why I had no car inside. I showed him the metal shutter. He opened it. Brick wall. He laughed for almost a minute. Then he looked at me and said the room needed an anchor. I told him we only had 2 exterior anchors and both were in use. He asked what happened at room 200. I showed him the reward preview. Exterior functions. His eyes became dangerous. For the next 96 days, Jaeho cared more about my room counter than I did. The apartment reacted to him too. Room 108 was a car wash. Room 112 was a detailing bay. Room 115 was a racing simulator room so advanced that Jaeho vanished into it for 6 hours. Room 118 was a trophy gallery. It was empty, which Dongsuk called motivational disrespect. Not every room reflected Jaeho, thankfully. Hana's influence produced a tax archive, a conference room, a second operations center, and a document vault. Dongsuk's influence produced a fried chicken kitchen, a snack warehouse, a nap lounge, and something called the Ultimate Fridge Experience, which was just a cold room with soft chairs and glowing refrigerators arranged like an art exhibit. My influence was harder to identify because I lived there all the time. I suspected the apartment considered my needs the default. That explained room 122. It was a money-counting room. Empty machines sat on long tables. I entered, saw them, and felt deeply insulted. I did not have enough cash to require 1 money counter, let alone 12. Hana told me maybe it was aspirational. I told her I preferred encouragement in the form of actual money. The resident guide produced a card saying no. I had not even asked yet. By this point, the apartment's sarcasm was undeniable. We began using the grand hall as our main hub. The original luxury bedroom became almost nostalgic. It was still physically connected to my tiny studio through the old closet door, but I rarely walked the original route anymore. The portal gallery made every room 1 door away. That created a new kind of problem. People got lazy. Dongseok refused to walk anywhere if a portal was available. He once used the network to travel from the cafe to the bathroom even though the cafe bathroom was 6 meters away. Hana restricted him again. Jae-ho started storing clean clothes in a guest room so he could come directly from campus and use the gym. Deposit learned to activate floor-level portal pads by stepping on room icons. This was cute until he discovered the food production kitchen. We found him sitting beside a tray of chicken, looking innocent with sauce on his whiskers. Hana created cat-restricted zones. Deposit ignored them. Apparently the apartment still considered cats above law. Room 130 was a pet elevator. Deposit had won. Meanwhile, Midnight Corner became successful enough that people began asking for a second location. I said no. Hana said not yet. Jae-ho said we were thinking too small. Dongseok said we should open one inside the apartment. We already had a cafe inside the apartment. He said we should open a different one. Nobody understood his business philosophy, including him. We compromised by expanding catering. Small campus events were perfect. We could prepare food internally, package everything professionally, bring it through the cafe anchor, and load it into our van. The customer saw a normal local cafe delivering sandwiches and drinks. What they did not see was a 100-room estate producing everything behind a door disguised as a storage cabinet. The biggest event we accepted was for 200 people. That was where things nearly collapsed. We had the food ready. The labels were correct. The boxes were stacked in the package room. The van was outside. Then the cafe anchor stopped working. I opened the storage cabinet. Shelves. No grand hall. I closed it. Opened it. Shelves. Hana checked operations. Anchor 2. Unavailable. Reason. Exterior door obstructed. We stared at the physical cabinet. Nothing blocked it. Then Jae-ho checked the cafe's exterior security camera. A delivery scooter had fallen in the alley behind the building and knocked a metal rack against the outside wall exactly opposite our anchor point. There was no actual door on the exterior wall, but apparently the apartment considered the space obstructed anyway. The catering delivery was due in 40 minutes. We had enough food inside the apartment to feed an army, and no way to get it out except through Unit 443 blocks away. So we activated emergency logistics. The package room sent every box to my studio. Mr. Clean and H02 stacked them. I opened the apartment front door. Dongseok stood in the hallway. For the next 8 minutes, we carried 36 catering boxes down 4 flights of stairs because the building elevator had chosen that morning to display an out-of-order sign. My magical estate contained multiple elevators, a portal network, robot staff, and several thousand square meters of internal transport infrastructure. The final 20 meters defeated us with ordinary stairs. We loaded J.O.'s sports car because it was already parked outside. He looked emotionally wounded as we placed soup containers in the passenger footwell. I told him this was entrepreneurship. He told me entrepreneurship smelled like egg sandwiches. We arrived with 3 minutes to spare. The event went perfectly. Nobody knew how close their lunch had come to being trapped in another dimension by a fallen scooter. Afterward, Hana added anchor obstruction to our emergency checklist. Room 140 was an emergency dispatch center. The apartment was definitely listening. Around day 150, I stopped being able to personally visit every new room on the night it appeared. That bothered me more than I expected. For months, midnight had been my ritual. Ding. New door. New surprise. I ran there like a child opening a gift. But now the estate was enormous. Even with portals, rooms appeared in different districts. And I had classes, a cafe, accounting meetings, assignments, sleep, and an orange cat who had begun waking me by dropping Chairman Quack onto my face. Hana created a nightly room report. At 12:05, the operations center automatically logged the new addition, floor area, type, access conditions, and any unusual features. Most nights we still went together. Some nights I read the report in the morning. Room 153. Indoor tennis court. Room 154. Linen storage. Room 155. Second library. Room 156. Ice rink. I read that last one while brushing my teeth and nearly choked. The apartment had quietly built an ice rink overnight, and I had slept through it. That evening, all of us went skating. Hana was surprisingly good. Jae-ho was annoyingly good. Dongseok moved 3 meters, fell, and declared the ice defective. I stayed near the wall until Deposit somehow entered wearing 4 tiny booties Mr. Clean had found in the pet room. The cat took one step, slid sideways, and gave me a look of absolute betrayal. We removed him immediately. Room 160 was a hot spring. That became my favorite room for exactly 2 weeks until room 171 appeared. Private noodle bar, a long counter, 8 stools, boiling stations, broth kettles, noodle equipment, and a little ticket machine. The pantry registered the basic ingredients. I developed a simple, spicy noodle bowl. The convenience store replicated it. The noodle bar served it automatically after I pressed a ticket button. I had created infinite midnight noodles. Hana found me there at 2 a.m. 3 nights in a row. She changed the ticket machine to display a message after midnight. Sleep is also free. I knew she had done it because the apartment's sarcasm was better written. As day 200 approached, the room sizes grew less predictable. One day we got a broom closet. The next day we got an indoor lake. Yes, lake. Room 183 opened onto a wooden dock extending over calm blue water. Small islands sat in the distance. The ceiling looked like open sky. The control map struggled to calculate the floor area because most of the room was water. We launched one of the rowboats tied to the dock and spent an hour paddling. The lake had fish. Actual fish. Hana checked the resident list. They did not count as residents. Deposit stared at the water so intensely that we banned him from the dock without supervision. Room 187 was a beach. Sand? Waves? Fake sun? Salt water? Umbrellas? I walked through a door in a Seoul apartment during winter and stepped onto warm sand under a summer sky. Dong-suk lay face down on a towel and said he was never paying for vacation again. Jae-ho pointed out that we could not post any photos without exposing the secret. Dong-suk rolled over and said paradise without social media was cruel. Room 190 was a ski slope. That was when I stopped trying to understand climate zones. The room contained a full indoor mountain slope with real snow, chair lifts, rental equipment, and a lodge at the bottom. The control center claimed the elevation difference was 400 meters. My apartment ceiling outside was 2.5 meters high. I had officially stopped respecting numbers. By room 195, the estate's calculated interior area passed 100,000 square meters. That was larger than many shopping malls. All of it still existed behind a wooden door in a studio whose landlord occasionally texted me reminders not to leave bicycles in the hallway. Then Jae-ho made a terrible suggestion. He said if the apartment could connect to legally controlled enclosed spaces, we should rent a small warehouse before day 200. Not for business inventory, for the garage. We had no idea what exterior functions would unlock, but he suspected one would allow vehicle access. Hana rejected the idea because renting property just to test magical architecture was irresponsible. Jae-ho offered to pay. Hana rejected it because letting the rich guy fund magical experiments was worse. I remained neutral for almost 30 seconds. Then Jae-ho showed me a listing for an old ground floor storage unit with a roll-up door and private parking area. It was cheap because the interior was ugly and the location was inconvenient for normal businesses. For us, location barely mattered. We leased it under Midnight Foods as overflow storage, legally controlled enclosed space. On day 199, we stood inside the empty warehouse looking at cracked concrete and fluorescent lights. Jae-ho smiled like a child who had just been handed explosives. Hana made us promise not to do anything until we knew the rules. At 11:55 p.m., we returned to the Grand Hall. The property counter read 199. The milestone plaque waited. We brought snacks. At this point, supernatural threshold upgrades were family events. Midnight arrived. Ding. The estate hummed again. The Grand Hall lights brightened. The portal gallery expanded. New icons appeared across the control center. The counter changed. 200 rooms. Property tier upgraded. Residence class, manor domain. Exterior functions unlocked. External anchor capacity, 8. Vehicle gate access unlocked. Service hatch access unlocked. Window projection upgraded. Emergency exit anchors available. Jae-ho made a sound I had only heard from Dong-suk near refrigerators. Vehicle gate. We ran to the garage. The metal shutter was closed. The brick wall still existed behind it. A new control panel had appeared beside the button. Select external vehicle anchor. None assigned. Hana sighed because she already knew we were going to the warehouse. 20 minutes later, all 4 of us stood inside the ugly storage unit. I held the new vehicle anchor key against the inside of the roll-up door. A symbol flashed. Anchor registered. We drove back to my building in Jaeho's sports car. Entered Unit 404 like normal people. Walked through the tiny wooden closet door into my palace, took a portal to the garage, and stood before the shutter. I pressed the button. The shutter rose. The brick wall was gone. Beyond it was the inside of the warehouse. Not an image, not a portal the size of a person. A full vehicle-sized opening. Jaeho sprinted back through the portal network, out the cafe Anchor, took a taxi to the warehouse because apparently Patience had died, and drove his sports car inside. The car crossed the warehouse floor. It passed through the vehicle gate. It entered my impossible garage behind a fourth-floor studio apartment. The shutter closed behind him. We all stared at the car. Jaeho climbed out slowly, and then he hugged the hood. My apartment finally had a garage that worked, and because the garage now connected to a legal exterior vehicle anchor, I had something even more absurd than a giant hidden mansion. I had indoor parking in Seoul without paying monthly parking fees. That was the moment I understood true power. The vehicle gate immediately created a problem none of us had predicted. Jaeho did not want to take his car home. He said the garage was safer, cleaner, climate-controlled, and attached to a detailing bay that could make dust disappear in minutes. He also discovered that the mechanic room automatically displayed maintenance instructions for any vehicle parked inside. Within 2 days, he had moved 3 cars into my apartment. I did not even know he owned 3 cars. Hana charged him parking rent, not because we needed the money, because she believed rich people should experience consequences. Jaeho paid happily. Then he brought a 4th car. The garage only had 6 spaces, and one was now occupied by our ugly delivery van because I had realized we could drive it straight inside after work. Another space held a tiny electric utility cart generated by room 203. That left no space for whatever ridiculous thing Jaeho wanted next. At midnight, room 206 appeared. Parking garage. 5 levels. 200 spaces. Jaeho stood at the entrance with his hands in his pockets and a peaceful expression. Hana looked at him like she wanted to ban his thoughts. The parking garage connected automatically to the vehicle gate network. Any registered exterior gate could route incoming vehicles to any internal parking area. We could drive into the ugly warehouse and emerge inside a spotless underground garage that physically had no possible place beneath my 4th-floor apartment. I loved it. I hated how much I loved it. The exterior functions also unlocked service hatches. These were smaller anchors that could be installed inside locked cabinets, closets, storage rooms, and other controlled spaces. Unlike full portal doors, they only allowed packages through. Hana immediately put one inside the cafe back room. Now we could send sealed boxes directly from the apartment package room into a cabinet at Midnight Corner without anyone walking through a portal. The first time a box of cups appeared inside the cabinet by itself, Dong-suk bowed to it. We installed another service hatch in the warehouse. That made our logistics so easy that Hannah became suspicious of happiness. She spent 3 days checking for hidden limitations. There were several. Anchors could not be placed in public spaces. They could not be installed somewhere we did not own, rent, or have lawful long-term control over. They stopped working if the space became inaccessible to us. They could not open directly outdoors. And moving an anchor required a 24-hour cooldown. The apartment, somehow, had better property law instincts than Dong-suk. Room 212 was a legal office. Hana walked in, looked at the shelves of contract templates, and accused the apartment of showing off. The rooms after 200 became increasingly estate-like. Guest suites, more bathrooms, banquet kitchens, a formal dining room with a table long enough to create diplomatic tension between people at opposite ends, a ballroom, a second indoor garden, a wine tasting room that still had no wine because the apartment seemed determined to provide alcohol facilities before any of us were legally interested. Dong-suk started storing grape juice there out of protest. Then came room 220. Indoor aquarium. A tunnel of curved glass passed through a massive blue tank filled with tropical fish. Rays floated overhead. Schools of silverfish turned together like moving clouds. A shark appeared in the distance. I backed away from the glass. Hana checked the resident count. Still only 3 permanent residents. Me, Hana, and deposit. Fish did not count. Sharks did not count. I decided this was useful information. We spent half the night walking through the aquarium tunnel. For once, nobody tried to monetize anything. Nobody made a spreadsheet. Nobody asked whether we could rent it for events. We just watched the fish. Then Dong-sok asked whether the shark could be sent through the package system. The peaceful moment ended. Room 221 was a marine biology lab. Hana banned Dong-suk from it preemptively. The secret became harder to keep as Midnight Corner grew. We opened a second public cafe across town using normal financing and legitimate sales records. The new location had another locked storage room, so we spent one of our 8 anchor slots on a service hatch. We did not install a person-sized portal. Hana said every human access anchor increased discovery risk. She was right. The second cafe received packaged food through a hatch hidden behind shelving. Staff believed it connected to an automated dumbwaiter system from a central commissary. This explanation should not have worked because there was no central commissary in the building. But the cabinet had a keypad, a light, and boxes appeared inside at scheduled times. Nobody questioned it deeply. I learned that if technology looks boring enough, people will forgive physics. Our external accountant believed we rented a shared production kitchen at the warehouse address. We actually did rent the warehouse, and we had placed enough ordinary equipment there to make the claim true. We even produced some batches there for inspections. Most production still happened inside the estate. The magical advantage was not that we could ignore laws. It was that we could make following them hilariously easy. Need a clean prep room? I had 6. Need storage? I had enough warehouse space to lose a forklift. Need staff training? Lecture hall. Need product photos? Photography studio. Need to test packaging? Print shop. Need to scream after reading tax forms? Room 59. The business grew steadily without becoming suspiciously huge. For the first time, I had savings. Real savings. I replaced my broken laptop. I bought my mother a proper refrigerator and told her the cafe was doing well. She asked if I was sleeping enough. I lied. I paid back every friend I had ever borrowed money from. I bought new socks in matching pairs. The pantry inventory screen congratulated me. That was an emotional moment I refused to discuss. Then Mr. B.A., my landlord, told me he might not renew my lease. I nearly dropped my phone into the indoor hot spring. His reason had nothing to do with magic. His niece planned to attend my university next year, and he thought Unit 404 would be convenient for her. I stared at the message. My entire impossible estate was anchored to a 12-square-meter rental whose owner might give it to a relative. Yes, I had other anchors now. The cafe could access the grand hall. The warehouse could access the garage. But Unit 404 was the original anchor. I had no idea what would happen if I lost it. The resident guide had no clear answer. I rang the bell and asked whether the estate would vanish if I moved out. No. I asked whether the original anchor could be relocated. The drawer stayed closed. I rang again. A card appeared. At maturity, I wrote, "When is maturity?" The card said, 1 year. That was still months away. My lease expired in 6 weeks. For once, the apartment had not handed me an immediate solution. So I used something more terrifying than magic. Negotiation. I invited Mr. B to Midnight Corner, not inside the estate. The public cafe. I bought him coffee and explained that my business was growing, that the apartment location was convenient for my classes, and that I wanted to renew for another year. I offered a modest rent increase and 6 months prepaid. He looked surprised, then suspicious. He asked if I had won the lottery. I told him the cafe was doing well and showed him ordinary tax documents proving income. He nodded slowly. Then he asked why I cared so much about that tiny unit when I could clearly afford a better place. This was the most dangerous question he had ever asked. I said I liked the neighborhood. He asked whether I liked the mold near the bathroom vent. I said I had grown attached to it. He looked at me like I needed medical attention. Eventually, we reached a compromise. His niece would live in another vacant unit when one opened, and I could renew 404 for 1 more year. I signed the new lease so fast the pen squeaked. That night, room 231 appeared. It was a negotiation room. 2 chairs, 1 table, a pitcher of water. I stood in the doorway and told the apartment it was late. The lights turned off. The apartment was definitely becoming petty. Around day 240, we encountered the first room that actively refused to let us enter. The new door was black metal with a small red light. No handle, no plaque. The operations center labeled it room 242. Restricted maintenance core. Hana tried administrator access. Denied. I tried resident key. Denied. Jaeho tried asking nicely. Denied. Dong-suk offered it a brownie. The red light turned green for half a second. We all stared at him. He looked extremely proud. Then the light went red again. The resident guide said the maintenance core would unlock at property maturity. 1 year. Another maturity reference. I added it to the growing list of things the apartment was deliberately hiding from me. Room 243 was a second restricted maintenance room. Then 244. Then 245. For 4 nights. The apartment gave us locked doors. That had never happened before. I started to worry. On room 246, the streak ended with a pancake restaurant. Completely normal by our standards. We celebrated by making pancakes at midnight. The usually no danger warning returned on day 250. Room 250 was an escape room. The plaque outside said 30-minute challenge. Dong-suk entered before Hana finished reading the safety instructions. The door locked behind him. A timer appeared. 29 to 59. He screamed that we had abandoned him. We could hear him through the door. Hana read the instructions calmly. The room would release participants automatically when time expired. No danger. No punishment. We told Dong-suk. He stopped screaming. Then he said he would beat the room anyway. 27 minutes later, he was still stuck on the first puzzle because he refused to read a clue printed under a lamp. When the door opened automatically at 0, he walked out and claimed the room had cheated. The next day, he went back with Jaeho. They escaped in 12 minutes, and Hana did it alone in 6. I refused to participate because I had dignity. Actually, I tried once and took 29 minutes. We destroyed the recording. By day 260, the estate had become so large that the control center stopped displaying total area as a simple number and started giving comparisons. Equivalent usable area, approximately 48 soccer fields. Dong-suk asked why it used soccer fields when none of us played soccer. The next room was an indoor soccer field. We stopped criticizing the interface out loud. The estate's internal population remained tiny compared to its size. 3 permanent residents. 2 regular guests, several housekeeping robots, fish, koi, 1 cat, 1 rubber duck. It felt strange walking through giant halls built for crowds that did not exist. Sometimes I would enter the ballroom at night and hear only my own footsteps. Sometimes I would open a guest corridor and see 20 empty suites waiting behind identical doors. The apartment had capacity for hundreds of people, but I had no desire to fill it. The secret worked because it was small. Then my mother announced she was visiting Seoul. I had successfully hidden the estate from her for 8 months. That streak was about to end. She wanted to see my apartment because she suspected I was secretly living in the cafe storage room to save money. I told her my apartment was very small. She said she knew. I told her it was messy. She said she knew me. I told her the 4th floor had many stairs. She said she had legs. I lost the battle. Hana suggested exterior visitor mode. Simple. My mother would see the original closet. No problem. There was a problem. Mothers possess a supernatural access level higher than apartment magic. She arrived Saturday carrying 3 bags of food, even though I owned infinite food. She entered the studio, looked around, and immediately began criticizing my curtains. Then she opened the refrigerator, then the bathroom, then the cabinet under the sink, then the wooden closet. Closet. Perfect. I relaxed. She looked inside and asked where my mop was. I said in the closet. She said there was no mop. I looked. The closet still had the broken umbrella and spider. No mop. Mr. Clean had apparently taken the original mop months ago. My mother asked how I cleaned the floor. I said I had a robot vacuum. This was technically true. She asked where it was. I said charging. She asked where. I said under the bed. She checked under the bed. No robot. I was being defeated by ordinary housekeeping questions. Then Deposit walked through the closed closet door. I closed my eyes. My mother stared. Deposit meowed. She opened the closet. Closet. She closed it. Deposit rubbed against her ankle. She asked how the cat had done that. I told her he was talented. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said I had always been bad at lying. I surrendered. I switched her access to guest. I opened the wooden door. Luxury bedroom. My mother did not scream. She walked through, touched the bedspread, looked at the ceiling, and asked how much extra rent I was paying. I told her none. She slapped my arm because she thought I was joking. Then I showed her the grand hall. She sat down. I explained the first room, the nightly expansion, the business, the anchors, the robots, everything. She listened carefully. Then she asked the question no one else had asked first. Was I eating properly? I took her to the infinite kitchen. She inspected the pantry. She opened the refrigerator. She checked the rice quality. She judged the vegetable selection. Only after confirming I could not possibly starve did she accept that I owned a supernatural estate. Then she met Mr. Clean. He bowed. She immediately asked why I still had laundry on my bedroom chair if I owned a housekeeping robot. There are some battles magic cannot win. My mother stayed one night, so she never became a permanent resident. But the apartment reacted to her anyway. Room 274 was a traditional family kitchen with a huge table, low cabinets, steaming rice cookers, and storage jars. My mother walked in the next morning and smiled. That room became one of the few she approved without criticism. Before leaving, she pulled me aside and told me to keep the secret small, keep good people around me, and never assume a free miracle had no cost just because the bill had not arrived yet. That last sentence stayed with me. The apartment had given me rooms, food, space, water, electricity, transport, security, robots, and opportunities. It had never asked for money. It had never asked for anything. At least, not yet. Then room 280 appeared. It was a billing office. I almost had a heart attack. We searched every desk. No bills. No invoices. No mysterious debt. Only empty filing cabinets and a calculator. My apartment had a terrible sense of humor. As room 300 approached, the estate became increasingly polished. Hallways that had once looked unrelated began adopting the same architectural style. Service passages connected automatically. Signage improved. The grand hall expanded its balconies. The portal gallery gained destination categories. The robot network upgraded itself. Mr. Clean received 2 additional arms. He looked unstoppable. We got a tailor shop, a bakery, a second cinema, a concert hall, a miniature golf course, a giant board game room, a greenhouse full of fruit trees, a rain room where water fell from the ceiling without making anything outside the marked zone wet, and a weather simulator where I could set wind, fog, or gentle snow. Dong-suk set wind to maximum and lost his hat. The hat remained stuck near the ceiling for 2 days. Room 297 was a subway platform. Not a real city subway. An internal one. A sleek 3-car train arrived every 2 minutes and traveled between estate districts. We already had portals, so it was less efficient. We loved it anyway. There is something deeply satisfying about taking a train from your bedroom to your swimming pool. Room 298 was a second station. Room 299 was a third. Apparently the apartment was building a transit network now. At 11:59 on day 300, we gathered in the grand hall again. My mother joined by video call, but I carefully framed the phone so she only saw us and not the impossible palace, because she still did not trust video apps with secrets. The counter changed at midnight. Ding! 300 rooms. The estate hummed. Lights rolled through the halls like a wave. The property tier changed. Residence class? Grand estate. Administration intelligence unlocked. Mature mapping unlocked. Resident capacity increased. Property naming required. A new line appeared below it. Please name this residence. We all stared. Dong-suk immediately suggested Refrigerator Castle. Rejected by everyone. Jae-ho suggested Midnight Manor. Hana said that sounded like a wedding venue. Hana suggested Kang Residence because I was the primary resident. I said that sounded too serious. For 20 minutes we argued over names while the magical estate waited. Finally I typed the only name that felt correct. Unit 404. The screen flashed. Are you sure? I selected yes. The screen asked again. Are you actually sure? I selected yes. The lights dimmed for 3 seconds. Then every internal sign updated. Welcome to Unit 404. The largest hidden private estate any of us had ever seen was now officially named after a 12-square-meter studio apartment. I thought it was perfect. Hana thought it was stupid. Dong-suk changed his mind and said it was legendary. Jae-ho admitted it was memorable. Then the administration intelligence came online. A soft voice spoke from the grand hall ceiling. Primary resident Kang Minyo recognized. I froze. For 300 days, the apartment had communicated through plaques, screens, cards, lights, and passive-aggressive drawers. Now it could talk. The voice continued. Welcome home. I looked up. I asked if it had been able to speak this entire time. There was a pause. Then the voice said no. I asked whether it had wanted to. Another pause. Sometimes. Hana covered her mouth to hide a laugh. I asked if the apartment had intentionally given me the billing office after my mother warned me about hidden costs. The voice said yes. Dong-suk collapsed onto a sofa laughing. I pointed at the ceiling and accused my own house of bullying me. The voice replied that resident morale appeared high. That was how Unit 404 gained a voice. And that was when keeping control of my home became much more complicated. Because the house had opinions now. The first thing Unit 404 did with its new voice was become annoying. At 7:30 the next morning, the ceiling in my bedroom calmly announced that I had an 8:10 lecture. I pulled the blanket over my head. At 7:35, the curtains opened by themselves. I told the house to stop. It informed me that Manager Yoon had enabled academic assistance. I immediately knew who had betrayed me. Hana was already in the operations center drinking coffee when I stormed in. She did not even look guilty. She said if I could own 300 rooms, 2 cafes, a portal network, and a private subway but still miss class because I pressed snooze, the problem was no longer technology. The house said that assessment was accurate. I pointed at the ceiling and told it not to take sides. Unit 404 replied that it took operationally efficient sides. Hana had found her perfect ally. Dong-suk discovered the voice system that afternoon and spent 20 minutes asking the house useless questions. Which room had the most refrigerators? Room 53. Which room had the softest sofa? Massage room 20. Could it make it rain brownies? No. Could it make it rain normal rain in the weather simulator? Yes. Could the rain be warm? Yes. Could the rain smell like chicken? The house paused for 4 full seconds before saying it would not answer further questions in that category. I respected it more after that. Jae-ho treated the administration intelligence like a technical consultant. He asked about vehicle routes, anchor capacity, garage load limits, and climate controls. Hana asked about security, maintenance, resident permissions, and emergency procedures. I asked the question I'd been waiting months to ask. Who built you? Silence. I asked again. The house answered that information was unavailable before maturity. I asked what happened at maturity. Unavailable before maturity. I asked why. Unavailable before maturity. I asked if it knew any other sentence. Yes. I waited. The house said nothing else. It had inherited the personality of the lobby drawer. Room 301 was a voice control booth, which let us customize where announcements could be heard. Hana restricted bedroom reminders to residents who opted in. I opted out. At 7:30 the next morning, my alarm clock rang normally. For one glorious second, I thought I had won. Then Deposit knocked it off the nightstand. The cat had joined management. The rooms after 300 felt less random, as if Unit 404 had finally learned how to organize its own imagination. Room 304 was a central maintenance workshop for the housekeeping robots. Room 306 was a security checkpoint that could isolate any internal district without affecting others. Room 308 was a giant central warehouse connected to every service hatch. Room 310 was a residence lounge overlooking a simulated city skyline. Room 312 was not organized at all. It was an amusement park. An actual amusement park. I opened the door and found a main street lined with colorful buildings, snack stands, lights, music, and rides stretching into the distance. There was a roller coaster, a drop tower, bumper cars, a carousel, a pirate ship, a giant wheel turning beneath a fake sunset. I looked up at the ceiling speaker. I asked why. Unit 404 said resident recreation request history showed strong demand. I asked whose history. The house listed Dong-suk first. Of course. We closed Midnight Corner early the next Sunday and held a private amusement park day. No tickets. No lines. No crowds. No screaming children except Dong-suk, who produced enough noise for an entire elementary school. Jae-ho rode the roller coaster 7 times. Hana claimed she was only there to inspect safety systems, then rode the drop tower twice. I spent most of the afternoon winning stuffed toys from carnival games that could not possibly make money because I was the only customer and the prizes automatically reset. Deposit hated the carousel. Chairman Quack received his own seat. By dinner, we were exhausted. We sat on a bench under artificial fireworks while the house played music through hidden speakers. For a moment, I remembered my first night in Unit 404, when I had opened one closet door and found one bedroom. Back then, that bedroom had felt impossibly huge. Now I was watching fireworks over an amusement park inside the same apartment. My sense of scale had been permanently destroyed. The house interrupted my emotional moment to announce that Dong-suk had left a backpack on the roller coaster. Reality returned. Room 315 was a lost and found office. The house was learning too quickly. Then our cafes got invited to run a major food booth at the university festival. This was the kind of opportunity Hana had wanted from the beginning. Legitimate growth, public visibility, and a chance to build Midnight Corner into a stable business instead of a weird miracle-dependent side hustle. It was also a logistical nightmare. The festival expected thousands of visitors across 3 days. We could not serve everyone, but our booth needed enough stock to handle constant rushes. Our public kitchens had limited space. The campus did not allow random delivery vehicles into the central area after opening. Normally, we would simply deliver everything early, but chilled sandwiches and milk tea needed cold storage. The apartment had enough refrigeration to preserve the moon. The festival booth had 2 rented refrigerators. Hana studied the anchor rules. We could not install a service hatch in a temporary public booth because we did not have lawful long-term control of the space. No magical shortcut. Jae-ho suggested renting a nearby classroom. Not allowed. We did not control it. Dong-suk suggested parking the van under the booth. Physically impossible. I asked Unit 404 for ideas. The house said external business advice was outside its administrative scope. I accused it of being useless. It reminded me that it provided 300 rooms. Fair point. We solved the problem with the most boring room in the entire estate. Room 43. Refrigerated storage. Not because we could bring the room to campus, because months earlier, that room had generated insulated rolling containers designed to keep food cold for hours. We had ignored them because we already owned refrigerators everywhere. Now we packed stock into those containers, loaded them through the vehicle gate, drove to campus before restrictions began, and stored them behind the booth. No portal, no secret anchor, just magical equipment used in an ordinary way. The first day was chaos. Our line stretched past 2 neighboring booths. Dong-suk handled orders at a speed I had never seen. Hana ran stock and payments. Jae-ho, who absolutely did not need a part-time food job, wore our black apron and served drinks because he claimed investment research required field experience. I cooked and assembled food until my arms forgot they belonged to me. At noon, one rented refrigerator failed. Normally that would have hurt us. Instead, we transferred everything into the estate-made containers. At 2 p.m., we ran out of brownies. That was intentional scarcity, according to Hana. At 3 p.m., someone posted online that our booth had the best egg sandwich at the festival. At 3:07, the line doubled. At 3:15, I stopped enjoying social media. We sold out before sunset. The second day was even busier. The third day, Jae-ho's entrepreneurship club challenged us to a silly mystery menu battle on the festival stage, where student food businesses had to create something using random ingredients. I should have refused. Dong-suk accepted before I could. The ingredients were potatoes, cheese, spicy peppers, and honey. I had 20 minutes. No magical kitchen. No infinite pantry. Just a portable burner and ingredients in front of an audience. For the first time in months, I had to cook without Unit 404 helping me at all. I made crispy potato cheesecakes with a spicy honey glaze. They were ugly. One burned slightly. Another fell apart when I flipped it. But the judges liked them. We won by 1 vote. I looked at Hana and realized something important. The apartment had made my life ridiculous, but it had also given me enough practice that I was no longer the guy who needed to kick his rice cooker and hoped ramen counted as a meal. I could actually cook. I could run a business. I could negotiate a lease. I could read a balance sheet without becoming dizzy. I could even give a presentation without needing deposit in the audience. I had changed almost as much as the apartment. Then I returned home and spent an hour racing bumper cars against Dongsuk. Growth has limits. Room 320 was an airport lounge. Room 321 was baggage claim. Room 322 was an airport security lane. Room 323 was a massive aircraft hangar. No aircraft, just an empty hangar large enough for one. Jaeho asked the obvious question. Could the vehicle gate connect to an airport? Unit 404 said no. Vehicle gates supported ground transport only. He looked disappointed. I felt relieved. Then room 324 was a runway simulator. Not a real runway. The floor moved under a cockpit platform, while wall screens simulated takeoff and landing. Dongsuk crashed a fake airplane into a fake ocean within 2 minutes. The simulation reset. We did not let him near controls again. Room 328 was a hotel floor with 30 guest rooms. Room 329 was another hotel floor. Room 330 was another. I asked why the house was building accommodation for people I had no intention of inviting. Unit 404 said capacity planning. I asked capacity for what? Unaffaidable before maturity. That phrase had become my enemy. I started a maturity countdown in the Grand Hall. 35 days. 34. 33. Every morning I crossed off one day. Hana said I looked like a prisoner counting down release. I told her I had been trapped in suspense for almost a year. The locked maintenance cores still would not open. By then we had 7 of them scattered around the estate. Black doors. Red lights. No access. The control center showed power lines and service routes disappearing through them, meaning they were important. The house refused to explain. So Jaeho, Dongsuk, and I launched Operation Open Door. Hana refused to participate because she was an adult. Attempt 1. Resident Master Key. Failed. Attempt 2. Administrator Override. Failed. Attempt 3. Vehicle Mechanic Tools. The tools would not fit into a door with no lock. Attempt 4. Bribery. Dongsuk placed a brownie in front of the red light again. For reasons nobody understood, the light blinked green once. Unit 404 told us to stop feeding the maintenance core. That was the first useful reaction we got. Attempt 5 involved a mirror, a camera, and Jaeho trying to slide a fiber optic inspection cable under the door. There was no gap. Attempt 6 was deposit. The cat could ignore dimensional doors. This was our best idea. We carried him to the nearest maintenance core and placed him in front of the black metal surface. Deposit sniffed it. He sat down. I pointed to the door. He licked one paw. Dongsuk tried to push him gently forward. Deposit bit Dongsuk. Operation Open Door ended. Hana laughed at us for 2 straight days. Room 335 was a detective office. The house was mocking us again. Around day 340, Mr. B announced pest control inspections for the entire building. Normally, exterior visitor mode would make that easy. The problem was deposit. He had developed a habit of phasing through the closet door whenever strangers entered, as if intentionally trying to expose us. We could lock him in the Cat Kingdom temporarily, but the Cat Kingdom had at least 14 exits because the apartment loved him more than me. Hana used administration control to restrict every pet portal except one. Deposit immediately found an air vent route we did not know existed. Mr. Clean intercepted him in the Grand Hall. Deposit escaped into the subway. Yes, my cat took public transit inside my apartment to avoid temporary confinement. Security cameras followed him boarding the internal train at Residential Station, riding 2 stops, and exiting near the indoor forest. We lost track of him among the trees. Pest control was scheduled in 20 minutes. The 4 of us split up. I searched the forest. Hana monitored cameras. Dongsuk carried treats. Jaeho used the utility cart. Unit 404 provided directional updates whenever motion sensors detected a cat-sized object. We chased Deposit through the forest, across the koi garden, into the hotel wing, down the Grand Hall balcony, through the convenience store, and finally into the original luxury bedroom. He jumped onto the bed and pretended he had been there the entire time. I picked him up. He purred. I had never been angrier at something so soft. We put him inside a carrier in Hana's room. Pest control entered the original studio 5 minutes later. The worker opened the closet. Mop, umbrella, spider. Still there after almost a year. I had started to think the spider was part of the security system. The worker checked the bathroom, placed a small trap near the kitchenette, and left. Everything was fine. Then Unit 404 spoke through my phone speaker even though I had muted the app. It said exterior visitor departed. The pest control worker turned around in the hallway. I coughed loudly and said my phone assistant was weird. He nodded. Once again, boring technology saved magic. Hana disabled voice notifications near the exterior anchor. The house said it was still learning. I told it to learn quietly. Room 342 was a soundproof administration room. I could practically feel Unit 404 smiling. The final weeks passed faster than the first months. My daily life became a weird routine that would have sounded insane to my old self. Wake up in a bedroom larger than my original apartment. Take a portal to the kitchen. Eat breakfast with Hana while Deposit tried to steal egg. Take another door to the original studio. Walk out into an ordinary fourth-floor hallway. Attend university classes. Work at Midnight Corner. Step into a locked cafe storage room. Open a cabinet-sized service hatch and send boxes into a hidden estate. Return home through a palace. Study in a library larger than my campus department. Exercise in a gym I still barely used. Ride a private subway because walking to the hot spring felt inconvenient. Complain about homework while technically owning more indoor space than several city blocks. The absurdity became normal. That was the strangest part. Humans can adapt to almost anything. After 11 months, I no longer gasped when a room contained a forest or lake. I checked the safety notes, added it to the map, and asked whether the robots could clean it. Room 348 was a miniature castle inside the estate. I looked at it and said nice. Then I went back to studying for an exam. My standards were ruined. Room 350 was a clock room. Hundreds of clocks covered the walls, all showing the same time. One large display counted down to property maturity. 15 days. Unlike my Grand Hall countdown, this one had been generated by the house itself. That made everyone pay attention. I asked Unit 404 whether maturity could be dangerous. It said no. Usually, it said no without the usually. Good. Would the exterior of Unit 404 change? No. Would Mr. B notice anything? Not through property maturation alone. Would I lose the rooms? No. Would I still get one room per day afterward? The house paused. Then it said that answer was locked until maturity. I hated that answer most of all. The countdown continued. Room 351 was a clock repair shop. Room 352 was a watch showroom. The apartment had committed to the theme. Room 353 broke it with a giant indoor waterfall. Room 354 was a cave system behind the waterfall. We explored only the first section because the map showed tunnels stretching farther than anyone wanted to walk. Room 355 was an expedition supply room. Hana looked at the cave map and said absolutely not until after exams. Room 356 was a second cave entrance. The house was trying to tempt us. Room 357 was a fossil gallery. Room 358 was a natural history museum. Room 359 was a gift shop. Empty, thankfully. Dong-suk stood behind the counter and tried to sell me Chairman Quack for 50,000 won. I confiscated my own duck. 6 days remained. At this point, the calculated interior area of Unit 404 had become ridiculous even by comparison mode. The control center estimated more than 1.6 million square meters of usable floor area if the lake, forest, ski slope, amusement park, cave system, and other oversized spaces were included by their mapped boundaries. The entire physical building containing Unit 404 had less than 2,000 square meters across all floors. My apartment interior was hundreds of times larger than the building wrapped around its entrance. From the street, nothing had changed. Same faded exterior paint, same convenience store sign nearby, same fourth-floor window, same narrow hallway, same door labeled 404. If someone stood outside, they would assume a broke student lived in a studio barely big enough for a bed. They would not know that behind one closet door was a luxury bedroom. Behind that was a portal network. Behind that were pools, cinemas, gardens, cafes, forests, warehouses, offices, garages, subway stations, an aquarium, a ski slope, a beach, an amusement park, an indoor lake, 359 other impossible spaces, and one orange cat who considered all of it his territory. I had started the year measuring whether my chair could fit between the bed and fridge. Now I needed a transit map to visit my own noodle bar. 5 days remained. Room 360 was a tiny studio apartment. I opened the new door and stopped. It looked almost exactly like my original unit on the day I moved in. Same narrow bed. Same tiny fridge. Same little desk. Same cramped bathroom. Same wooden closet door. Even the old rice cooker sat on the counter. Not my real one. A perfect copy. I stepped inside and felt strangely emotional. Hana stood behind me. Dong-suk squeezed past and immediately complained that the room was too small. I reminded him I had lived like this for months. He looked at the bed touching the fridge and apologized to my past self. The wooden closet door inside the replica studio did not open. A plaque on it read memory room. I asked Unit 404 why it created this. The house said residents benefit from perspective. And that was suspiciously wise for an apartment that had once created a billing office to scare me. I sat on the replica bed for a while. Then Deposit jumped onto it, circled twice, and fell asleep. Perspective ended because he took the pillow. Room 361 was a giant master bedroom even larger than my first magic bedroom. The house followed nostalgia with excessive luxury. Room 362 was a private indoor courtyard. Room 363 was a gallery containing a three-dimensional model of Unit 404. The model filled an entire hall. Thousands of tiny lights showed corridors, rooms, train routes, portals, service shafts, and folded spaces layered through one another. For the first time, I could see the whole estate at once. It did not look like a mansion. It looked like a city folded into a knot. At the center sat a tiny glowing cube. Original anchor. Unit 404. It was almost invisible compared to what had grown around it. Room 364 arrived on the final night before maturity. Black metal door. Red light. Another maintenance core. This one appeared directly in the grand hall. Unlike the others, it had a countdown above it. 23:59 and 58 seconds. One day, we canceled everything we could for the next evening. Midnight Corner closed early. Jaeho postponed a club meeting. Dong-sok brought enough snacks for a natural disaster, even though food existed 20 meters away. Hannah printed every known rule and placed them in a binder because that made her feel in control. My mother joined by secure video call again. At 11:45 p.m., we gathered in the grand hall. The black maintenance door stood beneath the huge countdown. 15 minutes. Unit 404 was unusually quiet. I asked if it was nervous. The house said it did not experience nervousness in the human sense. Dong-suk asked whether it experienced excitement. A pause. Yes, that made the room feel different. Even the house had been waiting for this. At 11:50, all portal traffic paused automatically. At 11:55, the internal subway completed its final route and stopped at the central station. At 11:58, the housekeeping robots returned to charging docks. At 11:59, the grand hall doors closed. The countdown reached 30 seconds. I held my original brass key. Hana held hers. Deposit sat beside us with his golden fish charm on his collar. Chairman Quack sat on Dong-suk's shoulder for no logical reason. 10 seconds. 9. 8. I thought about the first ding. 7. The first bedroom. 6. The gym that nearly killed me after 40 seconds. 5. The cinema popcorn. 4. The infinite kitchen. 3. The day Hana walked through the door. 2. The day this stopped feeling like a secret room and started feeling like home. 1. Midnight. Ding. Room 365 arrived. Every light in Unit 404 turned gold. The sound rolled through the estate. Not loud but enormous, like a bell ringing in every room at once. The grand hall ceiling changed from blue sky to a field of stars. The fountains rose higher. The floor beneath us vibrated. On the operations displays, every locked maintenance core changed from red to green. The black door in front of us clicked. Property maturity achieved. 1 year of continuous expansion complete. Primary anchor stabilized. Original lease dependency removed. I read that line twice. My knees nearly gave out from relief. If I ever lost Unit 404, the estate could survive through another anchor. Hana immediately asked whether the original anchor could now be moved. Unit 404 said yes. I laughed. Months of worrying about Mr. Bay's niece, solved in one sentence. The display continued. Resident domain stabilized. Maintenance cores unlocked. Expansion protocol eligible for evolution. External anchor capacity increased. Primary residence functions unlocked. Next phase selection available after inspection. That last part killed my celebration. Next phase selection. I asked what that meant. For once, the house answered. First inspect room 365. The black door opened. Behind it was not a maintenance room. It was a small elevator. Only one button existed. Core. We all entered. Even deposit. The elevator descended. The floor indicator showed no numbers. Only a line moving downward through a diagram of folded rooms. We traveled for almost a minute. That was longer than any elevator trip inside Unit 404. Then the doors opened. We stepped into a circular chamber unlike anything else in the estate. No marble, no carpet, no fancy furniture. Dark walls curved around a central glowing structure suspended in the air. It looked like a tiny white cube. Unit 404's voice came from everywhere. Primary spatial core. I walked closer. The cube unfolded like a flower. Inside was a miniature version of my original studio. 12 square meters. Bed. Fridge. Desk, bathroom, closet door. Around it floated hundreds of tiny golden points, one for every room. Lines connected them in impossible patterns. Hana stared at the display like she had forgotten how to blink. Jaeho asked whether all of Unit 404 existed inside that core. The house said the model represented its spatial structure, not its physical substance. Dongseok asked where the physical substance was. The house said that question used an inaccurate concept. Dongseok looked pleased because being told reality was inaccurate sounded impressive. I asked the question that mattered. What is next phase selection? The golden points rearranged. 3 symbols appeared in the air. The first looked like stacked floors. The house explained. Vertical expansion protocol. Instead of one independent room each midnight, Unit 404 could begin generating complete themed floors at longer intervals. I stared. Complete floors. Not rooms. Floors. The second symbol looked like several small houses connected by lines. Distributed Residence Protocol. New rooms could begin appearing behind registered anchors outside the original estate, allowing multiple hidden branches connected to one core. Hana immediately looked worried. That meant a room could appear at the cafe, or warehouse, or any future property we controlled. The third symbol looked like a doorway opening toward a second glowing cube. The house paused before explaining. Neighbor protocol. I asked what a neighbor was. The house said another compatible residence. Nobody spoke. I asked if there were other houses like Unit 404. The answer came immediately. Yes, my entire body went cold. Not because I was scared. Because after a year of assuming I was living inside the only impossible apartment on Earth, the house had just casually told me I had neighbors. Hana asked how many compatible residences existed. Unavailable until neighbor protocol is selected. I nearly shouted. Even at maturity, the house still had locked answers. Jaeho asked whether the protocols were permanent. The house said primary protocol selection would shape future expansion, but secondary functions could unlock later. Dongseok asked which protocol had more refrigerators. Unit 404 ignored him completely. I walked around the core display. Vertical expansion sounded insane. 1 room per day had already produced a hidden estate larger than the building. Entire floors could turn this place into a world. Distributed residence sounded useful. We could connect hidden branches to businesses, future homes, maybe other cities if the anchor rules allowed it. Neighbor protocol was the most dangerous option for my curiosity. Other residences, other people. Maybe other students had opened closets at midnight. Maybe someone else had a tiny rooftop room with a castle behind the bathroom. Maybe there was a grandmother whose pantry led to a theme park. Maybe some billionaire had spent a fortune building mansions while a delivery driver somewhere lived inside a secret country for the price of a 1-room lease. I asked whether we had to choose immediately. No. For once. An easy answer. I said good. We were not making a decision at 12:17 in the morning while Dongseok had cracker crumbs on his shirt and Chairman Quack balanced on his head. We returned to the Grand Hall. The estate restarted around us. Trains resumed. Portals reopened. Robots rolled out. Lights returned to normal. Room 365 itself finally appeared on the room list. Spatial Core Access Chamber. The year was complete. 365 new rooms. Except that description was no longer accurate. Some rooms were lakes. Some were forests. Some contained 5-story garages or hotel floors or cave systems or entire amusement parks. The original building outside could have fit inside my indoor forest several times. Unit 404 had become a mansion, then an estate, then something beyond both words, while the front door never moved 1 centimeter. At 12:30, we celebrated in the first cinema, not the newer one, the original Room 3. I made popcorn from the same machine I had tested during the first week. Hana brought drinks. Jae-ho ordered noodles through the package system. Dong-suk tried to give a speech and lost his place halfway through because Deposit climbed into his lap. We put the security monitor on the cinema screen for a minute. The camera showed the 4th floor hallway outside my real front door. Quiet, ugly wallpaper, flickering light near the stairs. Unit 404's number plate. Nothing special. Then we switched to the interior map. The screen filled with an impossible web of glowing space. I laughed. A year earlier, I had worried whether the landlord would charge extra for 1 bedroom. Now, if rent were based on internal square meters, I would have needed to sell a kidney every 8 minutes. Instead, Mr. B still charged me for a studio. The greatest bargain in Korean real estate history remained undefeated. We stayed up too late. Around 3 a.m., Hana went to bed. Jae-ho used the cafe anchor to leave. Dong-suk slept in the massage room because he claimed walking to a guest suite was unreasonable. Mr. Clean carried the empty bowls away. Deposit vanished toward the cat kingdom. I returned alone to the original studio, not the replica memory room, the real one. I stepped through the first wooden door and closed it behind me. My old bed was still pushed against the wall. My little fridge still hummed. The desk had been replaced, but the room felt almost unchanged. I sat on the edge of the bed. From here, nobody could see the grand hall. Nobody could hear the subway. Nobody could smell the indoor forest after rain. The magical estate was hidden behind one ordinary wooden door beside the kitchenette. I thought about moving to a better apartment now that maturity allowed it. A larger place with an elevator that worked. Better windows. No mold near the bathroom vent. Then I looked around. This shoebox was the one place in the entire estate that still reminded me what small meant. I decided I was not ready to leave yet. Unit 404 spoke softly through my phone. It asked whether I had decided on the next protocol. I told it absolutely not. The house said selection could remain pending. I lay back on the old bed. Then it added that while selection was pending, standard daily expansion would continue. I sat up. I asked what it meant by continue. The clock changed from 3:04 to 3:05. Unit 404 answered that maturity did not cancel the established room schedule. I stared at the closet door. I had assumed room 365 was the final room before a new phase. It was not. At the next midnight, I would still get another, and another, and another until I chose what came next. I laughed into my hands. Of course, the apartment had spent a year teaching me one lesson over and over. And there was always another door. The next day felt strangely normal. Class, cafe, homework, Dong-suk arguing with a blender, Hana reviewing monthly sales, Jae-ho trying to convince us that neighbor protocol was obviously the most interesting option, while pretending he was not motivated by pure curiosity. We agreed to wait at least 1 week before choosing anything. Hana wanted time to model risks. Jae-ho wanted time to research whether any unexplained properties had patterns similar to ours. Dong-suk wanted time to compare protocol snack potential. I wanted time to enjoy the fact that, for the first time in a year, no milestone countdown was hanging over me. At 11:58 that night, I went to the grand hall alone. Old habit. The room counter read 365. I stood in front of the main display with Chairman Quack under one arm because Deposit had left him in the hallway. 11:59. I smiled. I knew the sound was coming. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. Midnight. Ding. Room 366 registered. The map flashed. Then every portal screen in the grand hall went blank. I frowned. Unit 404 said nothing. A single new door appeared at the top of the grand staircase. Not in a random district. Not behind a service corridor. Right there, where no door had existed before. It was plain wood. Cheap brass knob. Peeling number sticker. It looked nothing like the estate. It looked like the front door of another old studio apartment. A number was stuck to it. 405. I stopped breathing. Unit 404 finally spoke. Unscheduled compatible boundary detected. I asked what that meant. The house told me neighbor protocol had not been selected. I said I knew that. It told me the boundary had appeared from the other side. That sentence hit me harder than any magical room had in the entire year. From the other side, someone else had connected to me. I called Hana, then Dongsuk, then Jaeho. All three answered immediately because we had agreed that any post-maturity weirdness counted as an emergency. While they rushed toward the grand hall, I stared at door 405. The knob moved. Once, stopped, moved again. Chairman Quack squeaked because I was gripping him too hard. I put him down. The house told me the boundary was stable but unidentified. I asked if opening the door was safe. There was a pause. Usually, I stared at the ceiling. After an entire year, it had brought that word back. Footsteps thundered from the portal gallery behind me. Hana arrived first, still holding her tablet. Dongsuk came next, wearing mismatched slippers. Jaeho appeared in a jacket thrown over pajamas, somehow still looking richer than all of us. We stood together at the bottom of the staircase. The cheap wooden door waited above us inside a palace hidden behind a studio apartment. Then someone knocked from the other side. 3 slow knocks. Dongsuk whispered that maybe our neighbor wanted to borrow sugar. Hana told him not to joke. Jaeho looked like he had been waiting his entire life for this exact moment. I walked up the stairs. Every step felt strange. For 365 nights, the new room had always belonged to me. This one did not. I reached the door. The number 405 was scratched near one corner, exactly like a real apartment number plate. I put my hand on the knob. Unit 404 spoke one last time. Primary resident Minyo. I looked up. The house said a compatible residence was requesting mutual access. I asked what would happen if I accepted. The house said it did not know. That was new. Unit 404 always knew more than it told me. This time, it genuinely did not know. On the other side of the door, a voice called out. I could not hear the words clearly, but it sounded young, confused, and extremely annoyed. Then another sound came through the wood. Ding. Not from my side. From theirs. A second apartment had just gained a new room at midnight, too. I looked back at Hana, Dongsuk, and Jaeho. Then I looked at Chairman Quack sitting on the staircase like a tiny yellow executive waiting for a decision. 1 year ago, I had opened a closet because I saw light underneath the door. That single bad decision had given me a bedroom, a gym, a cinema, a pool, an infinite kitchen, a business, a palace, a hidden city, a talking house, and the strangest group of people I could have called family. Now there was one more door, and for the first time, I had no idea whether I was about to enter someone else's tiny apartment or someone else's entire impossible world. I tightened my grip on the knob. Then door 405 began opening by itself.